We'll get started in just a minute. We've got a little technical difficulty up here, but we're about to get it resolved. David Soriano, if you can hear me, we need your assistance out here with the recorder tonight, please.
Like right here, like after the presentations, just this. If I had it in my hand here, I could pass it out.
I think Tom may have gone to get David. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Haltom City Council Workshop, May 13th, 2003. I think all of us are aware of why we're here, and Mr. Torres at this time will give us an overview. I do want to ask, does everyone in the audience have a copy of the agenda? If you do not, I think there have been plenty of those printed, and they should be back. So if you'd like to have a copy of the agenda and what will be happening and the sequence with which it will be happening, we would appreciate you getting a copy of that. Also, we'll begin our meeting tonight with an invocation and a pledge of allegiance. Council Member Williams will lead us in that. So if you will, please stand for the invocation and the pledge.
Bow your heads, please. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time that we can come together, Lord. Pray for us as we go to make the decisions to look at the future of the city and these people that are involved and the citizens involved in Haltom City. Pray for us, Lord, that we'll have open minds and make the best decisions that we can for the city. Most of all, Lord, make sure that we make the decisions that are pleasing to you. Pray for each and every one here, Lord, that they'll have a safe journey home. We ask these things in thy name. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before Mr. Torres begins his comments, I want to point out the fact on the sheet that you have that provides the agenda. If you'll notice, there is a section for visitors to make comments, and all of you will be given an opportunity to make comments at that time. You will not need to fill out a yellow visitor's request to address the council, a speaker request form. You'll just be asked to come forward and give your name and address for the record. So just be aware that a little bit later in the meeting you'll be given an opportunity to make your comments. With that, Mr. Torres, would you like to give us an overview of what we're doing here tonight, please?
Mayor and council and visitors tonight, I feel like I need to kind of run through things for the benefit of those who haven't been following the current issue and the purpose of the meeting tonight. The city of Haltom City is currently caught up in a declining economy. We're well aware of the impact the economy is having on many businesses and corporations around the country and even here in Texas, but it's also occurring at the municipal level. We're experiencing the pinch here. Our normal revenue stream is dropping to the point that we anticipate lost revenues in this fiscal year to be as much as $1.2 million. The purpose of the meeting tonight is to, again, consider some options that we may have for addressing the problems. The City Council's previously been sent information about the nature and anticipated extent of the problem. We've also provided a proposal from staff about our plan for cutting expenses to the degree that the fund balances are affected in the most minimal way possible. One of the things that we would like to achieve tonight is at the end of the meeting is to potentially walk away from here with some very clear direction as to the City Council's desire. That may be in the form of setting up future meetings. It may be in the form of just a motion, a directive to staff to do particular things, or whatever. I don't really have it identified specifically, but we need direction tonight. Time is of the essence. We've been dealing with this issue really for close to 2 months, I guess, since we began discussing it in a big way. Some of the comments earlier were, why has this just occurred and why haven't we been looking at this? Well, in fact, since the very beginning of the fiscal year, we've been discussing this every month as revenues come in and we start to see them drop and drop. Those reports have been made to the council and to the public, and it's been a well-known thing that things have been on the decline. But how far down they're going to go, we don't know. And it's still dropping. And so our concern is getting greater and greater, and any kind of change or effect that we're going to have to put into place, the longer we wait, the more difficult it is to do that. So we're really concerned that tonight we walk away with something, some kind of direction. Staff has prepared a presentation for the City Council, but we're not planning on spending a lot of time on this tonight. We really want to hear from you. We'd also like to allow each of the directors an opportunity to briefly run through a few of their concerns and issues and particular projects that they may be working on that may be impacted by any of the budget cuts. I've also asked that they spend no more than 3 to 5 minutes on each one of these presentations because, as you'll see, I think there's 12 different people plus myself. I'll be back to the podium in a while, and it's going to take a little time, to probably close to an hour, to get through this. I'm thinking that the first 2 presentations may run a little bit long, and as those 2 individuals get into the topics, I think you'll understand that. When they're through, though, I'd like to offer some comments of my own, run through a few issues that have been out there. Maybe I can clear up some of that. Then I will present to you an additional proposal that we've been developing over the last 24 hours or so that may look attractive to you. So at this point, I'd just like to turn it over to Pat and let him run through his PowerPoint presentation.
Do we need to do anything with the lighting?
No, I think it'll be okay, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. This is basically the same presentation that I gave to the council and to the community a week ago. I have updated it just a little bit to take into account some of the more recent sales tax receipts that we have received in the last week, and some other issues that have come to our attention. But the manager was right. The nation is suffering an economic crisis. It has hit our local municipalities just as hard. It's hit the state and many other states. We had September 11th, and then last summer we had the collapse of Enron, something that no one thought was possible, followed by Arthur Andersen's collapse, and then WorldCom collapse, all of which have really hit this nation's economy, and even nearby a giant corporation like American Airlines just barely dodged the bullet a couple of weeks ago. This first chart, and council members, you do have copies of this presentation that was passed out to you earlier, and I think most everyone in the audience should have a copy. Shows the history of what we refer to as our fund balance, basically our savings in the bank. Rainy day fund, an absolute emergency fund. It has hovered in near the $2.5 million mark for the last several years, but you can see, and if I can get my arrow here, last year it ended lower than the year before. And our original goal was that it would have ended a little bit higher, about where I put the arrow. Our projections right now are showing a substantial drop at the end of this fiscal year. This is something the manager has expressed a great deal of concern about, and something that is a very important financial indicator for the community. I did show you last week how the general fund, which is the major source of our difficulties right now, is dependent on about 3 major sources of revenue. You have franchise fees at 25%. This is your electric franchise, the franchise we received from Southwestern Bell. The cable companies. Other taxes really should be labeled simply sales tax. That is what it is, 99.9%. And then with the third largest is 24% is property tax, something that most people think is perhaps 90% of our revenue, and it's just not true. It never has been. Sales tax and franchise fees are over 50% of our revenue source, and those are 2 areas that have been severely affected now. I'll save that. Our property values have increased in the last several years, and it doesn't show real well on this chart, but this increase from 2002 to 2003 was only 2.2%. The increase from 01 to 02 was over 11%. That's probably not going to continue into the next year. The state of Texas, I read this quote from our state comptroller just yesterday, is experiencing a historical first. Since the sales tax was first initiated in 1961, revenues are declining for 2 consecutive years, something that's absolutely unheard of. This shows a month-by-month, 3-year history of our sales tax. In the current year, and I tried my best to brighten this up on the screen, but I think on the handout it shows up better. In the current year, only 1 month out of the first 6 that we have here, and it's the far right-hand column in each of these 3-column stacks, is the current year. Only 1 month has come in above the prior year's number, a prior year actually, and that's the October number, which was above the October amount 2 years earlier. All the others are below the previous year. This one you can see is substantially lower. The numbers behind that chart are reflected here. These are the numbers month by month for the current year, and you have this in your handout, and you can see how each of these months going across consecutively is lower than the year before and even 2 years ago. The fact that we're receiving less than we did 2 years ago is just unbelievable. The current budget for sales tax this year is $4,120,000. Our current forecast, which is based on past history with a Kmart in there and a Winn-Dixie and some of the other businesses, shows a $605,000 deficit. We believe it's a bit worse than that. We're adding $200,000 to that shortfall estimate for the impact of Kmart and the Winn-Dixie. This is a 10-year history of our sales tax receipts for the year, and you can see that it had a pretty good continuing steady rate of increase here up until last year. We've always budgeted a very conservative 3% growth, which was basically something we were just counting on for inflation. Last year it came in below budget, and this is what we're anticipating for the end of this year. This chart is to try and illustrate to the council, I think they're more familiar with it than most, but also to our audience, both here in this room and on television, how a great deal of our expenditures go towards public safety. These 2 taller columns in this chart are the police department and the fire department on the right-hand side. If I had stacked those 2 together, it would have been about $8.5 million. It would have touched the ceiling practically, and it would have even more so dramatized how much public safety is a part of our daily operations in comparison to all the others. The column on the far left, the pale blue column, is a collection really of about 9 other departments in the city, administration, cable television, city secretary, and so on. I've added all those together for administration, and they're still dwarfed by these other two columns that are public safety. And then we have street and drainage here, the library, parks and recreation, and we have what we call non-departmental, which are expenses that are not attributable to any one particular department. My purpose in this chart was to show that if serious cuts were necessary, it's almost only natural and unavoidable that they're going to affect the public safety segment of our operations because of its sheer size and proportion of the entire budget. And then people have often wondered, why does it have to affect people? Well, this chart shows how much of our budget, $14.5 million, is devoted to salaries. And what I've got here on the far left-hand side, that tall pale blue column, shows that out of $14.5 million, 11.2 million of that goes out in the form of a payroll check or a benefit of some sort. Every month I send a check in the neighborhood, I think, of $125,000 to the retirement system for the people who work for this city. And we send out large checks each month to pay for the group health insurance and so on. So if you have to cut $1.1 million in the general fund, excuse me, it's very hard to find it in these other areas that are not salaries. At one point in the discussions of what to do and how to do it to save money, at the last meeting, after the last meeting actually, it was suggested that we poll our employees to try and see what they might think of a across-the-board type of pay cut. And I don't want to get into the results of that survey right now, but this spreadsheet shows what the impact or what the savings would be really of a 1% reduction across the board. It would save $31,000 in the general fund, and then so forth and so on, 2%, 3%, and 4%. 4% would save $124,000. That's the remainder of this year, 8.7 pay periods if everything went into effect on June the 2nd. If we were to annualize that amount for the entire fiscal year next year, because if these cuts were to take place, they would probably remain in place for the next full fiscal year. You see the respective amounts here for the general fund, $93,000 for the whole year if it's 1%, $186,000 for 2%, and so forth and so on, to $372,000 if a 4% reduction across the board. I almost put this bottom part on a separate chart, but this shows how this would impact different employees in different ways. We have 90 employees who make between $20,000 and $30,000 a year. A 1% reduction would mean $275 a year less for that employee. For someone at the top tier here, we have 42 employees above $50,000. It would mean $727 over the period of 1 year. And then, of course, if you go across, you can see it's multiplied 1, 2, 3, and 4%. Let me continue. We have 91 employees who earn between $30,000 and $40,000 a year, and we have 49 employees that earn between $40,000 and $50,000 a year. This is a total of 272 employees. It's based on those who are actually employed as of about a week ago when I drew this information down. And that's all that I had to say. This is the survey that I mentioned earlier, and our Human Resources Director, Janita Murrow, is going to comment on this.
Mr. Elfrink, if you would, I think Councilmember Fowler has a question.
Certainly.
Now, what is the protocol, Mayor? Are we supposed to ask questions now per department head, or hold them till the end, or?
Yes, if we have a few questions, probably so. Go ahead and ask them now. I don't want us to get bogged down, and we could on any one of these presentations, but if we've got a question or two that really jumps out at you that you feel just has to be asked now, you have certainly an opportunity to do so.
If you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Elfring, could you go to page 3
Uh-huh. Yes.
of the graph,
On the-
or bring it up? Yeah, please. Yes, sir. So when will we see the forecasted effects of the Kmart closing? I know we've spoken, sales tax revenues generally lag behind in our receipt of the sales tax themselves. So when will we see that?
The check that I received this week for the state sales tax revenues reflected the sales that the retailer made in the month of March. So that March number that you see on that chart reflects the final days of operation of the Kmart. I believe it actually closed about 10 or 12 days into the month of April, but I visited it near the end of March, and they didn't have much left to sell. I imagine their sales tax revenues were declining daily. So what we have is now we have 6 months of receipts, 6 months of sales that we've received. I won't get the final revenue check for this fiscal year until the 10th day of November. So I won't know for sure how we end up this year. So we continue to forecast and guess.
Okay, well, what's our forecast and guess then for April and May?
I don't make that on a monthly basis, on month-to-month basis.
We have
it's
no
done.
idea.
I could probably work one out. If you see right here, and I'll just speak up, you can see 2 years ago it was 272,000. Last year it was 281,000. The way this particular chart works is it takes the two of those and it actually takes the average and then backs into what last year's or what the current year's forecast is. And it does a mathematical calculation to come up with the current forecast that's over here on the far right hand side. The current forecast is 3,514,000. The chart doesn't work on a month-to-month basis. We could
Well,
do that. I don't know if it add any level of accuracy to it.
I understand. I guess my layman's interpretation from an accounting standpoint would be that if the business closed in March, April would be very poor. It wouldn't
Yes.
average.
It would not. And that's the reason at the bottom right where you see it says a $605,000 shortfall, the estimate that we're making is $805,000. We think there'll be that much more of an impact from Kmart, Winn-Dixie, and the other stores that have left
Okay,
us down.
can you go to page 4 then?
Which particular chart? This one?
No, it's a sales tax, general fund only.
The one you just had up there first. Yeah.
Okay. There's two. Well, actually, there's two shown on here. Is this the next graph?
Do you want the
Page
bottom
5?
one?
No, go ahead. Let's go with this first one. I have a question on it. You made the comment that we budgeted conservative at a 3% growth, but I'm looking at 2000 and 2001, we were 1.1% to the good. Is that correct?
That's above the budget, yes.
Right. And then 2001, 2002, we saw a 5.9% decline.
Yes. But that wasn't known until November of 2002. We set that estimate in June of 2002.
Okay. Okay, but this is prior to this past year's budget then, correct?
It's
we knew
prior.
We knew we were at a 5.9% deficit.
We didn't know that until we closed our books actually in December. When we got the last check on the 10th of November, we knew how we ended the year. And we had set that budget, we had revised that budget in June, about 5 months earlier.
Okay. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at, to where, if we're budgeting a 3% growth and we experienced a decline to 5.9% below budgeted, or for our general fund budget, and then this year we're 14.7% below budget. How did we get there?
Next year's budget estimate is flat. That's my recommendation, and it may be even less than that. But bear in mind, we didn't know it was 5.9% until about 5 months after we had set the budget for that year. In June of 2002, we brought to this council the estimate for ending last fiscal year. That was probably, I think, before the Enron collapse, before WorldCom, or just at the very beginning of those financial catastrophes that did have an impact on the way people spend their money across the country, because a lot of people were affected.
Well, and I most definitely agree. I mean, a lot of that stuff was unforeseen, but I look at how we're in the shape we're in, or how we got there, and I guess that's what I'm trying to prevent in the future. You know, how do you go from 2 years declining general fund revenues? You know, why would we budget flat again? Why would we not budget down here at...
I may reconsider it at this time and budget a negative growth.
Well,
maybe a 3% decline, maybe 5%.
Well, I would say if we're at 14.7% below forecasted this year, I would say we'd probably budget it somewhere around 15% below, below where we were at this current fiscal year, because I would think that would be a little more true to where,
It would be a very pessimistic point of view when most people now think the economy is going to recover.
Well,
Your estimation method says the economy is going to stay as bad as it is for the next year, and
Well, I would
everything I
think
read
that it would
says
be a
it's
lot
not.
better than put ourselves back in this predicament again. I would think it would be a lot better to budget low and then have our revenues exceed that than it would to be budget high
That's
and
exactly
be looking at layoffs.
right. But when we made that budget last year, we had no idea that Kmart was going to close its
Well,
doors.
and I understand. I mean, there are
Yes.
variables in there that the city manager, that no one knows, but I would think we would be remiss if we turn around and go right back and budget flat again and say that even if the economy does come back, you're not going to experience it for 2, 3, 4 months behind
That's right.
the lag, so you're right back in the same situation again. Before it catches up, you're still in the hole.
You will see a very conservative estimate when you're presented with the budget.
I would hope so. Okay.
Anything further?
That's all I have currently. Thank you.
Mr. Elfrink, I believe we're ready for the next presenter.
Mayor and Council, in your packets, there's information on the employee survey that was presented at the end of last week.
For the benefit of our TV audience as well as our audience here, you're still relatively new. Will
I'm sorry.
you give us your name
I'm
and your
Joni
position?
Damaro. I'm the Human Resources Director
Thank
of the
you.
city. The first sheet is the tabulation of the results. The survey went out actually on Friday. It was due back in Human Resources on Monday. The survey went to 270 persons. 4 were returned due to vacation, so there was a 266 possible responses. We did receive back 237. That made an 89% response rate. Going down the results, 10 persons chose that they would be willing to return their salary level back to that of 9/30/2002. That equates to a 4% response. 24 individuals said they would return to their salary reduction of 2%. 196 individuals said they would not prefer a salary reduction at this time. And 7 individuals returned their envelope, but they did not indicate a response. So overall, we had 237. I also have attached a copy of the survey instrument for anyone who would like to look at that document. In addition, the only other thing, just as a summary, and April can certainly provide additional details, if we do look at any vacating of any positions or freezing any step plans, I know that's been mentioned before, we would have to do that by ordinance. I think April has already given us an opinion on that, and that would require council approval, and that has not been brought to y'all tonight. So just leave that with y'all. Any questions?
Questions or comments for Ms. Mara? Thank you, Ms. Mara. Jerry McIntyre, Fire Chief, next presenter.
Mayor, Council. I'll be as brief as I can with only 3 minutes. I think I'll focus on what the net effect of vacating 3 firefighter driver positions would be. That would reduce our number of drivers from 12 to 9. The drivers would be demoted to the position of firefighter, paramedic, or firefighter EMT, whichever the case may be, and they would be demoted in accordance with a reduction of force policy. Ultimately, 3 firefighter paramedics would be vacated or laid off in that case. This reduction in personnel will have a significant change in our current service delivery and deployment of services. Currently, we have 15 assigned to each shift per day, and with the vacation of 3, that would put us at 14 per shift per day. Currently, we do not have an overtime budget to support any vacancies in that, and so it kind of makes it a little more difficult to keep that constant staffing up. With this reduction, we would also change how we deploy our apparatus from the station. We'd go from 2 engines, a quint, and a battalion chief rescue truck to 2 engines and 1 quint and a battalion chief response. In other words, we'd take the rescue out of service, and the rescue's been a very important piece of equipment to us in District 1. We currently staff it with a lower number of personnel, normally 2 people on that. We do a lot of the still alarms, special assignments, car fires, EMS calls, and things like that. Smaller piece of equipment, more agile. We get out there a little quicker, a little easier to move around. On average, Rescue 471 responds to about 44.5% of our total call volume, so either in a primary or secondary response. So it's an important piece of equipment in our overall scheme of response. Those alarms that Rescue 471 normally would receive would be taken by Quint 471. It's a larger piece of apparatus, but we'd be required to assign those folks to that, what we had left, to keep those companies running. Our current average response time is about 3.5 minutes so far this year. I do believe that reducing from 4 apparatus to 3 apparatus, we will see an increase in response times, average response times. I can't give you an exact number of what that would be because there are so many factors that are included into calculating response time, but it makes sense that if we go to 3 apparatus responding, we're going to have a slight increase in response times.
Questions or comments for Chief McIntyre? Councilmember Williams.
I got one question, Chief. When you got on a fire, say a structure fire, how many men is it 3 or 4 men we send on a truck now?
Currently, we're under a mandate by the state, and on the 77th legislature, they passed the 2 in, 2 out OSHA rule. It's what we call it, 2 in, 2 out, which requires us to have 2 men enter the structure. We have to have 2 men outside the structure to serve as a rapid intervention team. So currently, right now, we've been lucky in the last 8 months that we've not gone below 11 on staff. So we try to run 4 men per apparatus and never less than 3.
We go to a fire if we just got 3 men, victims inside the structure.
Under the 2 in, 2 out rule, if there is a victim in the structure, we can act without the RIT team being in place.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything further for the chief? Thank you, Chief McIntyre. Our next presenter, Chief of Police Ken Burton.
I'm Ken Burton. I'm the police chief. Been here a couple of months. It's been kind of a baptism by fire, trying to learn about the department and make some of the necessary changes and then be confronted with the budget issues that we've been confronted with over the past 60 days. It's nobody's fault. It's just fiscal reality, and I took the approach when looking at the police department and the organization that there are things in every organization, particularly in policing, that are nice to have, and then there are those that you need to have. So with the numbers that I was asked to look at reducing in my budget, which totaled about $400,000, I recognized very quickly that this was not something that was going to go away overnight. We were probably looking at things that needed to be changed, and then we needed to look at them staying that way for an extended period of time. And talking to Mr. Elfrink, Mr. Torres, that's the approach I took. I have to tell you that I probably would have made these recommendations anyway, even without the budget issues. Going into next year with just a flat budget, go in with the same amount of money, I would have had to make some organizational changes that would have necessitated reducing services in the areas of the nice to have. So the impact to my organization with leaving the 5 vacancies would be this. First of all, the storefront would be closed. That secretarial person would be brought back to the police department. The officer and the supervisor that are currently assigned there would be assigned to patrol. The second thing is that the warrant division would permanently go away. Right now there's a part-time sergeant and an officer in there, and those folks would come back. I know that is a concern, that we need to get out there and run those warrants and make sure that we're getting that revenue from those outstanding warrants. And what we would do, and already have as a matter of fact, is work with the judge and the municipal court to take a different approach. Just to give you an example, Melissa Pace, the municipal court, is now providing us updated information on outstanding warrants, which is being provided to patrol officers. Lieutenant Roper has gone through those and goes through those when we get those and identifies the beat where that person is, and we are asking officers during their discretionary time to go knock on the door, leave reminders for those folks if they have warrants outstanding. If they have a warrant outstanding and we find that person, then they'll be placed under arrest and brought to jail. I think we can have the same impact or even better impact with a system like that than we have with just the single officer that's right now left in the warrant unit due to our vacancies. I'll tell you right now that I wish Jerry McIntyre was in the same shoes I am, and that he had a few vacancies already so that names and faces didn't go with those. And we're in that position. I have 5 vacancies. And what I propose to the city manager is that I do without filling those 5 vacancies. We take the reduction in our authorized strength, and we provide basic police services, 911, offense investigation, and those things. And for the time being, at least, get out of the community services business on such a large scale. Get out of the warrant business on such a large scale. That's kind of my synopsis there, and I'd be happy to answer any questions for you.
Councilmember Williams.
Chief, you was talking about doing away with the storefront. I know the structure that we moved from was less than desirable, and the one we got now has real good visibility. The contract that we signed, or the lease that we signed on that, what sort of a financial bearing is that going to be on us if we close the storefront?
The way I interpret the lease, and we'd have to ask the attorneys to look at it, that there is a clause within the lease that says that we will make timely request for the funds for the lease payments. If for some reason the city was unable to meet that obligation, with a 30-day notice prior to the beginning of the new fiscal year, we could actually terminate that lease without penalty.
Are you familiar with what the lease is?
I'm sorry, sir?
Are you familiar with how much the lease is?
Yes, sir. It costs about $2,400 a month. There is the basic rent payment. Then there is a $420 fee that we pay to use the parking lots and things like that, like all the other tenants on that property.
Electricity and maintenance is on top of that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Hurley.
I had a couple of questions. Excuse me. I had a couple of questions, but Mr. Williams asked one of them. Do you realize, or have you investigated, find out what the cost of converting the storefront into the storefront as it stands today?
What it cost initially?
Yes.
Yes, sir. It was $186,957. And I considered that when I made this proposal, but I have to tell you, it's not going away. I still needed to cut $400,000 out of my budget. So I would have to cut that, or I could cut it out of the people that answer 911 calls. I didn't have a choice.
Other question, talking about wiping out the warrant division,
Yes, sir.
is not the warrant division self-sufficient and supporting itself in the revenue brought in per officer?
I think initially when it was designed, and if we were at full staff, yes, sir, I do. But what you don't know is that we're carrying most of our vacancies there right now. And we have one officer that's permanently assigned to the warrant division, and then the part-time bailiff that works for the municipal court. So it's going to be a minimal impact at best over what we're doing right now.
Do you know what the backlog on warrants served
Yes, sir.
is?
It's
What?
extensive. I can't give you exact numbers off the top of my head, but Melissa and I and the judge have been in discussions on how to reduce that, and we've got some ideas we're going to be working on. We have to get innovative, Mr. Hurley. When the money's not there, we need to find other ways to collect those warrants, and we're doing that.
Thank you.
Anything further for Chief Burton? Councilmember Henderson?
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, so we're going to have to continue to pay this rent payment up until 30 days before the new budget takes place.
Yes, sir. We would have to pay, and I'm begging my attorney's indulgence over here. My interpretation of it is that we could notify them 30 days prior to the end of our fiscal year, and all we would be responsible for would be the rents through September 30th. The lease would basically be terminated because the council would not appropriate the funds, could not appropriate the funds.
Right. Why wouldn't we operate there until that time frame?
We would. We would. We can stay there. My proposal, there's a couple of other things going on at the police department that are part of my reorganization. Deputy Chief Cliff James has come up with a 12-hour shift model that I think will increase the number of officers we have on the street during the evening hours and on weekends when we're the most busy. It's just a more efficient use of manpower. He has proposed that. We have gone through human resources, and it looks like we're going to go to that model. But to do that, we need that supervisor. I need a supervisor in the jail. This is just a reorganization, like I said, that I would have recommended anyway, because we need that supervisor in the jail. We need the supervision in patrol, and this would be a way to do it with the same budget I have right now.
That's all.
We would stay in that building. Now, let me finish answering your question there. We would stay in that building through the end of September, or another city department could use it through the end of September. You know, there are other options. If we wanted to keep the lease and put another city department in there, that's an option. I mean, but that would be for you to decide.
Well, that brings up a good point. We're currently running several services out of that thing after hours. I know the rec department's running exercise and karate classes and several other things that we're offering.
Right, some
right now with
aerobics
the-
classes. Sure.
Right.
And we could do that through the end of September.
Okay. No further questions.
Councilmember Fowler, Councilmember Averett, and Councilmember Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief Burton, I'm glad you brought that up. That was my question on the power shifts, the 12 hours. That will that not allow us to not only better serve our citizens, put more people on the street, which I've always been a proponent of, but will it not also help us with the overtime and
Yes, sir, it should.
with the, and I'm sorry, let me
Okay.
finish it real quick. And then the shift, I know at shift change seems to be a lot of, you know, you hear it from people, that's when the criminals get out and do their most business at shift change, because guys are either in writing reports and then you're understaffed on the streets. I know that I've spoken with some of the officers, I believe either Bedford or Hearst, that went to like the 12-hour shifts, and there was a little bit of I guess resentment towards it at first, but then after a few months of it, they said they really like it, and they feel like that it better allows them to not only serve the public, but they can go in and do a report and still have the same number of individuals on the street due to overlapping schedules.
It helps on several fronts. Right now, the current model we're using does not use an early-late start, is what you're talking about. Bringing a few officers in off the street, letting them check out, bringing a few on, and then letting the other group come off, and then replacing them. It's very easy to do. You just overlap and have a couple come in early and a couple come in late and change their work hours. It gives us so much more flexibility than the 3/8 in a 24-hour period. And what we have done is try to be preemptive on whether the employees liked it or not. It was their decision. We went to them, we said, this is something that's out there, it's an alternative work schedule. If you're interested and you'd like to try it, we'll give it a 6-month pilot. And they overwhelmingly have indicated to their supervisors they want to do that. So Lieutenant Roper and Chief James have done a good job of going out and educating them about the upsides and the downsides. It's a long day. But the advantages to it is you're working about 7 out of every 14 days. And we get almost on a firefighter schedule that way. So not quite as good as theirs, but it's close.
Thank you.
Councilmember Averett?
Chief Burton, how many officers right now currently serve in our CID division?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. I know that's been a criticism in the past, is that we had more officers in CID than we needed. I may ask for Chief Bowie's help here, but when you talk about CID, the Haltom City Police Department has historically lumped a lot of different positions in there. Crime scene, the task force officer that's assigned to the narcotics task force, the officer that's assigned to the auto theft task force, the, who else? Property technicians. All of those people were normally lumped into CID. So if you look at just the number, it's 13? 13 officers. That's not how many you have working offenses. 7 is what we have left. So, and that is not unusual at all for an agency our size. That's well in line.
What would be the ramifications if we were to pull back the officer assigned to the auto task force? I believe it is auto theft task force. What would be the ramifications of that?
I think that would not be a wise move because his salary is reimbursed. It's free. He's over there, and if we were in dire straits and we just had to have the personnel on the streets, we had a couple more resignations or retirements, then that would obviously be an option. Right now, with just the number of vacancies we have, we can make it happen, still get the benefits of that auto theft task force, and his pay is reimbursed, overtime included.
You said we have 7 currently in the CID division, basically.
Yes, sir. Working cases.
Working
yes, sir.
cases. How are they justified?
Well, it's based on the number of offenses and the caseload that they have to carry. You can reduce the number of detectives in CID, but what you're going to do is you're going to have to assign those offenses that are occurring to another detective. So you either have 7 detectives in there with a manageable caseload, or you put 4 in there that the stack is so high they can't even be effective.
Right.
So there's a balance there, and we think we're there.
On a monthly basis, on an average, what would you say their new caseloads coming in would
New ones coming in? Yeah, it's a definite guess, but 40 and 50 cases. What we then use is a solvability formula to determine whether or not that even needs to be assigned to the detective. If it doesn't, then we inactivate the case and no more is done on it. We get more leads, then we reopen the case. The only cases they're actually assigned are the ones that have a probability of being solved.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Sutton.
Thank you, Mayor. You'd mentioned before, Chief Burton, that you'd been here 2 months, and you came from Bryan, Texas, where I noticed that you had a wonderful record of accomplishment down there. Now, let's put our focus on this community here. In your estimation, do you feel that any of the proposed cuts degrade the level of police service or protection for our community that you are uncomfortable with?
Not that I am uncomfortable with, because I know during better budget times, things like that come back. Okay? The Community Services Center is a wonderful thing. It's a great accomplishment for a city our size to have one. But the reality is it's about a mile from our police station. Most of the time a storefront operation, it's because it's geographically needed. It's a great facility. It's a wonderful place. The people that work there enjoy working there, and they enjoy working with the citizens. But that's a nice to have. And some of the things that I have in mind for the Haltom City Police Department are going to involve all police officers in those kinds of things, where you don't have a specialty unit just to deal with citizens. All officers ought to have that mentality when they're working in the field. So those are things that I have planned for the future, so it doesn't scare me in the least.
Okay, and the second point is, do you feel like these cuts would impact the morale of the police department in any way?
You know what? Those men and women are very smart. They know what's going on. And they know that you're between a rock and a hard place when it comes to finances. You know, there's varying ideas in the department about why it happened or how long it took to happen or anything, but the bottom line is it's nobody's fault. And they understand, and the supervisor, there he is over there, Sergeant Ragsdale, over the storefront. Very early on I told him, I'm considering this. And here's why. He understands. He understands. If he had his druthers, would he stay over there in that job? I think he would. He enjoys what he's doing. But I see him as being a benefit to the other officers in patrol that he'll be exposed to because of the way he feels. I think it's a win-win.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I think from the lights I see, no one else has a question. Thank you very much for that. I want to remind my colleagues that what we're trying to focus on tonight is not developing an overall philosophy for the next year or 2 years. We're trying to solve a problem for the next 4 months. And if we can keep that parameter in mind as we ask our questions and as we focus on this, I think we can move forward thoroughly and efficiently with our meeting tonight. Our next presenter, Director of Public Works, another newcomer to the area, Mr. David Fain.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I want to go over 3 things, just give you a quick overview of the operating budgets in Public Works, the impact of the reductions, the possible reductions in our operation, and then talk briefly about reduction in employees. There's several budgets that are recognized in Public Works, and one of them is the Street Reconstruction Fund. This fund is supported through a variety of revenue sources, which include, of course, the sales tax in our community that was approved by voters several years ago, bond revenues. Also supported is transfer revenues from the Street Assessment Fund and transfer revenues from the Water and Sewer Fund to cover specific costs for utility replacements and interest income. Also, the fund supports purchases of maintenance material and equipment needs for the street department. This particular budget has not been earmarked for any recommendations of budget cuts. I feel like this has probably been a real priority of the council. And here again, this is a different revenue generator. Also within Public Works, of course, is the Street and Drainage Department and water maintenance and construction and distribution and collection. And of course, as we well know, revenues are generated for these funds through our water and sewer bills that we send out to our customers every month. But first of all, street and drainage. This is a fund that is in the general fund, as Mr. Elfrick highlighted earlier in his presentation. And before you, we've recommended 17.8% reduction in this particular budget. In this budget is things such as drainage maintenance and street maintenance operations. The drainage account was cut tremendously. Of course, I'm sure the question will be, can we continue to operate? We're very fortunate in Public Works that we do have quite a bit of equipment, and we do have a big employee force, so we're actually able to get out and do work in our drainage areas. I believe this particular count was actually to spray some of the drainage areas to reduce the problem with weeds, but there may be other ways to accomplish that. Here again, 17.8% reduction in that particular fund. In water and sewer, we have here again 3 funds: construction, water and sewer maintenance, collection and distribution, and also Public Works Administration. So there's actually 4 accounts there. We're looking at a possibility of an 8.4% reduction in the construction fund. That's primarily material accounts. We're very fortunate also that we have quite a bit of material on hand that we can continue to perform the projects that have been earmarked and finish those projects out by the end of the fiscal year. Here again, because of material on hand. Same thing for water and sewer maintenance, material on hand quite a bit, but we did look at reducing those particular line items. Collection and distribution, it's just a 1.7% reduction, although it's a quite large account, but more than half of that account is to pay the water and sewer bill to the city of Fort Worth. We did not look at reducing that, obviously. Public Works Administration is a fairly small budget, and we're looking at a possibility of a 5.9% reduction in that particular account. Employees were all affected with cutback in employees, especially in public works, as in police and fire. Without our employees, we cannot perform the work at hand. However, I'm very fortunate to have some very good supervisors, and I could take individuals from different areas and combine the workforce depending on what is the most priority for the week, the day, or the month. So I'm very fortunate to have that at hand. There's 4 positions that are particularly frozen in public works, and looking at possibility of 2 reduction in forces. One's a public works maintenance worker, and another one is an office personnel. This particular position is very critical to our operations, because when this particular position is reduced, there's no one to take that person's place. As out in the field where the maintenance workers are, we have so many of those. 1 or 2 is not as critical in the operation as it is in this particular position. There's just no one there, and this person plays a very key role in our operation. With that, I will answer any questions that you may have.
Questions or comments for Mr. Fain? Thank you, Mr. Fain. Our next presenter, Director of Library Services, Rodney Bland.
Mayor, City Councilman, and City Administration. My presentation tonight will focus mainly on some proposed library budget cuts and the corresponding reductions in services to the citizens. In order to achieve the city manager's recommended budget reductions in the library's operating budget, corresponding reductions in public service hours will be necessary. Currently, the library has fewer part-time employees than is required to maintain the current service levels. Therefore, the library's public service hours will be reduced to the following schedules beginning Sunday, May 18th. We will begin closing Sundays. We will open Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 12 noon and remain open until 9 p.m. We will maintain Friday hours from 10 until 6 and Saturday from 9 until 5. By reducing the number of public service hours from 64 to 52 weekly, the library department will eliminate 1,680 part-time hours, resulting in a projected savings of $24,000 for the remainder of this fiscal year. Additional savings will be realized in the utilities account of the library. The library department has already instituted budget freezes at my instruction. The library administration and staff are working so that the budget reductions do not have a dramatic effect on the collection rebuilding effort that was undertaken over 2 years ago. We have completed approximately 1/3 of the plan and will attempt to minimize the effects of budget reductions to the library books and other material accounts. In economically distressed times, the public library is used more, not less. We have patrons coming into the library to use the resources to update their resumes, search for jobs on the Job View link, study to take employment tests, having librarians proxy their tests, getting self-help books and materials on auto and home repair, researching and reference medical and legal books and materials, and checking out more materials for recreational reading, listening, and viewing. Professional librarians assist them with their questions and aid them in their use of the internet and the online databases. We are being asked to reduce the number of professional librarians by 1. Additional reductions to the library department budget will seriously impact the library staff's ability to provide basic library services, programs, and materials to the over 160,000 individuals who visit the library annually. Budget reductions are difficult for all city departments. The library is only one city department and must do its part. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions or comments, I'll be happy to address them at this time.
Councilmember Williams.
Thank you. Mr. Bland, as you know, I'm not really up on the libraries. You've taught me more about libraries since I've been here, since the history of Haltom City. Sundays closed compared to other cities.
The nearest libraries that are open, Keller Public Library, the 2 regionals of the Fort Worth Public Library, the Central Library, Fort Worth. That's basically the ones in
I'm
our
talking
area.
North Richland Hills, Watauga.
They're not open.
None of those are open,
No.
but we do have some other available.
Yes. Our Sunday hours here are basically family times. Families go to church, come in, use the libraries together, a lot of internet use, a lot of research, young people doing homework, things like that.
I know you have a counter going in and out there. Have you ever done any numbers on your Sundays compared to one of these other days of the week?
Yes, sir.
How will they compare?
Sunday is one of our busier days. We're only open 4 hours, and from April 2002 to March 2003, on Sundays we had 9,473 people come in. That was an average of about 182 people per day, 45 per hour on Sundays.
What would be the impact if you went ahead and opened on Sunday and leave the other hours as they are?
I'm sorry?
If you left the other hours as you have them on your new hours and you went ahead and continued to open on Sunday, what would be the impact? Financial
When you
impact?
put Sunday hours in, the other hours just come along with it. And the reason for that is that you have to almost hire a separate crew to do Sundays so you can cover the hours.
Okay,
So
thank you.
basically, if you open Sunday, you can restore the other hours.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Fowler, and then Councilmember Averett.
Councilmember Williams asked my question about the possibility of keeping Sunday, current hours on Sunday, and then leaving the rest of the schedule the same, but I guess you answered that, Rodney. Is that, I mean, virtually impossible, or is there still a possibility of with current staffing to do that on Sunday?
No, we
Couldn't
can't
do
do
it.
it with current staffing. The issue becomes a safety issue. If you try and put too few people into too many hours, then we don't have people to back one another up, and there's not only a service issue, but the safety issue because of the size of the building and different things.
Okay.
It just takes a certain number of people to run a building that size for a certain number of hours.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Averett. Okay, Mr. Bland, thank you for your presentation. Parks and Recreation Director George Fowler will make the next presentation.
Mayor, Council, I'd just like to say that we're in a unique situation in Parks and Recreation, the fact that we have somewhat of an involuntary shutdown at present, just due to construction. So I face it with a little different situation than some of the other department heads that have been hit a little bit harder. There's 3 divisions in Parks and Recreation. There's Senior Center, the Maintenance Division, and then the Recreation Division. And in order to meet the criteria that I was given, I pretty much came up with about a 28,000 reduction in both of the maintenance and the recreation, and a $2,000 reduction in the Senior Center. The Senior Center reduction would just be mainly it was going to happen regardless, so it's not going to amount to anything. That was going to take place. We're not cutting any hours or anything there, other than the fact that it was going to happen regardless, just through attrition. The maintenance division, we have been without a supervisor. We have a acting supervisor, and I think y'all met him last night, Carl Milius here. It has strained his job to do what he's doing. He's trying to do both jobs, and I've come to the conclusion he can't continue to do it for an extended period of time. We can finish out this year, and I know that's what we're talking about. We can do that, but when it comes next budget time, we're going to ask to unfreeze that position. Next thing is the recreation. Just because the recreation center is still closed, well, actually it's non-existent now except for the gym. It's just a flat ground out there now. We can drop down. Our problem is we're shifting personnel to cover activities at the storefront, and then to continue to cover our recreation trailer, I'll call it. And then we have other classes that we're covering at the senior center one night a week. So We can do that. It's going to stretch us, but we can do it. But when the budget comes to do for 03 and 04, when the rec center opens back up and for safety issues, we're going to ask for probably that position back in addition to at least one more to cover the staffing there.
Questions or comments for Mr. Fowler? Thank you, Mr. Fowler. Our next presenter, City Planner James Pliska. I don't believe Mr. Pliska's here.
That's an error on my fault, Mayor, because he's across the parking lot at the library with the ZBA and the, yeah.
Okay,
So
so
he
if
may
he
join
comes
us a
in,
little later when their
we'll-
meeting is completed, but he's not here, so we should
Okay,
pass.
our city engineer, Mr. Greg Van Ewen Hughes.
This doesn't mean you get his time, okay?
I'll try to be brief, just don't egg me on. All right, in my department, we're proposing that one position that's currently filled be cut or be laid off. And then I've offered additional cuts beyond that in the spirit of maybe some other departments not being able to meet their targeted cuts. So I'll briefly discuss those first. I have a balance of a little over $1,100 in computer equipment expenses that I'm offering not to spend for the remainder of this year. Service agreements, that's where I pay for my cell phones. I have one individual that has his own cell phone, so he didn't need one, so that covers that cost. And then normally I have a surveying account, and that way, from time to time, if I need to get a property owner to grant an easement on a street project we've designed or something, that money covers the surveying costs that are necessary for the easement documents. So far this year, I haven't spent any money out of that account, so I'm proposing to give up that whole account altogether. But the main thing that I wanted to talk to you about is the loss of the civil engineering position in the engineering department. Currently, the civil engineering position handles all the AutoCAD drawings that we do, all the drawings that we get from developers or other engineers that are in an AutoCAD format only have one license. This isn't the individual who has the license who operates the software. This individual is also the city's floodplain administrator. He's been recognized by the state. He's passed a state exam. He's also, in the state of Texas, a certified floodplain manager. He handles all floodplain development. The impact to the community is, right now, normally floodplain's not something a developer will probably think about it, but an individual homeowner or the small mom and pop that's going to open up a commercial entity, typically they'll buy the tract of land or plat it and not realize that they have floodplain on it. It's an extra step in development. This position normally handles that. So I have the ability to take over that, but obviously that would introduce an element of time that's not there currently. This position, as I indicated, he handles all new development, all the plats that come through for, again, the mom and pops, the multi-lot subdivisions. I will be candid, we haven't had a multi-lot subdivision in quite some time. However, as recently as today, there is an entity looking to develop a multi-lot subdivision. He handles all the commercial building permits. We've got quite a bit of property in this town that's platted. Specifically, Garland Heights comes to mind, where you'll have somebody that wants to open up a concrete business or a plumbing business. This position handles all those building permits. This position also conducts all of the traffic studies in Haltom City. This position is a licensed engineer. When I learned traffic engineering, I wasn't a licensed engineer. However, all my recommendations had to be approved by one. I think it's important that when we conduct these studies and the liabilities that are involved, that the individual doing the study be a licensed engineer. Also, this position manages all minor infrastructure projects. From time to time, this position will handle street reconstruction projects as well. But a lot of times what we have is when you have a 1 or 2 lot development, that developer is required to put in 300-400 foot of water or sewer. And this is the position that reviews those plans, and it's his project. He handles the contractor, though the contractor doesn't work for us. He handles the contractor during construction.
So those are some of the main things that this position is responsible for. With that, told you I'd be brief. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Sutton.
Thank you, Mayor. Greg, as I understand it, the engineering department employs 4 engineers at this time. Is that correct?
Correct. There's 4 engineers that have graduated with an engineering degree. One of the engineers is a engineering associate. He's only been out of college for a little over a year and can't even obtain his license or try to obtain it till after he's worked in the engineering position for 4 years.
Okay. Could you briefly elaborate on what each of those 4 positions do for the benefit of the council?
Currently, right now, because of the problems we've had on Carson Street, I have not really had the ability to enjoy the engineering associate position as an engineer for my department. He's been pretty much full-time construction inspection on Carson Street. As you know, that's project's winding down, so I'll be able to have that back in the engineering department. He has been, I think it's been a huge asset to have someone with his background act as a construction inspector, because he's got a little bit more familiarity and understands the formulas behind why you lay pipe on certain grades and that type of thing. But he will now, when he comes into the engineering department and work up here at City Hall, I pretty much have to train him from scratch now as an engineering associate and not, a construction inspector. The other engineer that I have is a civil engineer that's right now in here looking at being laid off. The other position that I have is also a licensed engineer. That is the assistant city engineer, and he's my right-hand man. Right now, the city probably has, and Charles helped me, about $20 or $30 million worth of construction going on? So, and between that, the assistant city engineer and myself, I don't know that it's 50-50, but we handle pretty much 95% of all that. And then you have myself.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Fowler.
A couple quick questions, Greg. Richard, I may need help from you also. Construction inspectors fall under your department?
Yes, sir.
And the engineering associates is also acting as a construction inspector?
Right on one project. With that 20 to 30 million, I believe that's probably somewhere around 15 to 18 projects. So I have the construction inspectors divided up amongst those projects, and then I have the engineering associate position solely assigned to Carson Street.
Do the construction inspectors and the engineering associate, do they have the wherewithal to do any inspections on facilities, such as, i.e. the fire station renovations? And then are we in a contract where that we're in a situation where I know we went out and hired an independent engineering firm, third party, to do construction inspections. Is that a possibility?
Let me answer the first part and let Richard answer the second. The first part, it's a different type of inspection, and Mr. Cottongame's not here, but the inspection that's typically done on private property, your building and construction, your electrical, plumbing, your HVAC, that's specialized, and the individuals that work for me don't have that knowledge. And in the converse, what I'm dealing with in the field is concrete pavements, asphalt pavements, drainage pipe, sewer pipe, and water pipe. And while one might think that, look, water and sewer in the ground has got to be the same as in the building, it's totally different. The forces that are out on pipes that are in the ground due to their size are much larger than what's in the buildings. So you have to treat that differently. You look for different things when you inspect it. Consequently, on the building inspections, it comes from time to time where you'll have a large structure, something like, what's it, Farm Chem, I can't think of the name of the Medtronics right now. That building may have a 4-inch or a 6-inch private water main through it. That's not something the building inspectors are used to seeing, and when we get to something, and that's kind of odd for the city, but when you get something like that that's obscure, the building inspectors ask my construction inspectors for help in that. So we do help each other out, but there really is a big difference between the type of inspection that the building inspectors do and the type of inspection that my guys do.
Okay.
Anything further, Councilmember Fowler?
Well, I guess.
And that is the reason we went out and sought outside consulting services to oversee those 3 facilities, because we didn't have in-house expertise to do that. We would have had to have gone out and gotten someone. I was particularly driven on oversight of these projects being very intense. We just come off a facility that was constructed here, the animal control facility, that really didn't get the kind of attention that was needed, and as a result, we had some problems with that. These three projects, I feel certain that the money that we're spending on it is well spent, because it's going to give us the ability to deliver these on time, on project, on budget, and with no difficulties. And so far, it's just working great. So I really support that money that we're spending on the inspection services.
Who did the inspections on the State Fair food renovation in the Medtronics facility?
And after hearing Richard talk, but I'm thinking, well, what's the difference on the animal shelter and the Medtronic facility? The Medtronic State Fair Foods, you had an owner that was there every day on site. He had his own inspectors. It was our building inspectors that, again, inspected the electrical, the plumbing, the HVAC. They did not inspect the thickness of the concrete on the floor. Certain things that you as an owner are going to make sure you're going to get, maybe you'll hire your own personnel to do that. And both that happened on the Medtronic and the State Fair Foods. On the animal control facility, I think we might have treated it too much like that. And instead of being an owner that would more actively involved, like which Richard has now on the three current projects, we took it as when the contractor needed an inspection for electrical, plumbing, or HVAC, we sent out the building inspectors, and perhaps we should have had our own company representative on site all the time, and we did not have that, and I suspect that might be why we had some of the problems we did on that structure.
Okay.
$10 million on those three projects. Our contract for the inspection services over a year and a half period, I think, is about $200,000. So it's a chunk of money. It's a significant amount of money, but in the overall scope of what we're spending, and it's pretty small. So I guess it remains to be seen. If we deliver all three of those projects as we think we can, looking back, I really believe it's going to work out well for us.
Well, of course, hindsight's easy to look back on. I know you weren't involved in the animal shelter project, so.
I actually do have some experience in building some facilities and going through all those motions. And sometime let me show you some of the cracked concrete cores that I have in my office that are kind of something I keep with me. And it's an indicator of the kind of problems you can have if you don't have your own set of eyes and ears on a project. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Our next presenter, Kent Flynn, our Economic Development Director. Okay, I don't believe Kent is in the room at the moment. We'll move to our... There we are. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got some handouts here, and I've got a board I need to bring in. Come around the corner here. Let me pass these down.
And while we're doing that, let me mention for the information of those in the audience, after Mr. Flynn's presentation, we have two more. When we get through with those two presentations, we'll take about a 10-minute stretch break, and then we'll come back in for the comments and proposal by the city manager. But for the moment, Mr. Flynn, the floor is yours.
I'm going to have to move this forward as we get into it, but I want the audience to at least have a glance at it. It's not a very good graphic, but it's the only one I've got for tonight. But as I get into that part of the presentation, I think you'll appreciate the significance of that. The majority of my time tonight I'm going to spend with a presentation on possible revenue sources that could possibly help us with the budget shortfall. But before I get into that, the manager has asked me to address the impact of the loss of our business development coordinator. Although the Economic Development Department is not funded by the general fund and the Economic Development Corporation maintains a large fund balance, the business development coordinator that we just hired, that position has been vacated and is now frozen. And this has just come after we finally got a professional person in that position, after we got an office built and furnished. and started producing some projects that I think this community deserves to have as part of its economic development program. There are many projects and programs that we've long had planned for the economic development program in this community that are dependent on having some production support staff. I just don't feel that I can do the job that this city deserves without some production staff. The primary reason for that is twofold. One, most of the cities that we compete against have for many years had 2+ personnel in economic development. These are even smaller communities like Benbrook. So we're at a disadvantage competing with those folks. They have production staff and they can churn out very professional and modern marketing materials to attract new businesses. And the second reason is the most obvious. I'm only one person and I can't be in two places at one time. Even though I can burn the midnight oil, and I've been known to be up here to 3 or 4 in the morning on many occasions, if I stop to do production in support of what I'm doing, that takes me away from the other duties that I need to be constantly doing. A lot of my time is spent in meetings, negotiating, working with TxDOT, working to eliminate development pitfalls as they may occur and to get out in front of development problems that could handicap us from attracting new businesses. So the production help is badly needed, and I would encourage the council to consider that as far as in consideration of the business development coordinator position. The rest of my presentation tonight is going to be concerning the board that I have here, and that is one part of the presentation. The handout that I gave you deals with possible revenue sources. I'm going to give at least part of this to the audience. That's the chart. There's two sources that I'd like to cite as possible revenue sources that you might want to consider, that I don't know that they've been calculated into or at least the first one, I don't know if it's been calculated into the projections for shortfall, and that would be in conjunction with the State Fair Foods abatement reduction. State Fair Foods has a 10-year abatement that the City Council granted beginning January 1 of 2000, and it was a graduated abatement. And so the first 3 years, all but $2 million was abated. As of January 1st of 2003, that was raised to all but the first $4 million. So automatically on January 1st, we picked up $2 million in property values that will generate approximately $90,000 in property taxes. And I don't know if this has been calculated into the shortfall or not, but I wanted to make you aware of that. The other project that I've been working on for some time now is the city-owned properties, taking an inventory of what properties we have to determine if there's any surplus properties that we could sell. And this project has it's very complex in that for many years the inventory, if you will, and I use that term very loosely, of these properties was handled by our administrative I guess what was our assistant city manager. I can't remember his title. There you go, administrative services director. And when he left, there wasn't really a good inventory. There's various departments that thought they knew what we had. Public Works came together a few months ago and did an inventory of the properties that they'd been mowing. And germane to determining how we can sell these properties is a lot of research on the part of our tax attorneys, because the method in which we acquired these properties determines how we can sell them. And I've been working with our tax attorney, Bruce Medley, on this part of the project, and I'm to the point where I have, I think, enough information to pass along to the council and propose a course of action. I've given you a handout with 2 text pages The first one is what I would consider an action recommendation, and I'll focus on that one in my presentation tonight. The second page is a excerpt from my April 7th, what I call my 515 report that I do monthly to the manager and council, where my last month report I kind of outlined the process involving the different kinds of property. And I give you that for background primarily. The third handout, and this is what's been distributed to the audience, is an Excel spreadsheet that tries to categorize and summarize this information. In the top memo that you have before you, I talk about the first round sale versus the second round sale, and this is what I would recommend as a course of action if the council deems appropriate. The first round sale that I'm proposing would be the most expeditious properties, that is, those that can be handled the fastest. Those properties involve tax foreclosures. Tax foreclosures, we've been advised, those properties that have been taken back for back taxes do not have to adhere to the local government code provisions on selling property. So what that allows us to do is sell those properties by sealed bid if we so desire. And in order for this body to be the only governmental entity involved, it's been recommended that we sell them for what's called the minimum bid. And the minimum bid is the second column from the right on the spreadsheet. And those 5 properties that are highlighted in yellow are the only tax foreclosures listed. Out of the 35 properties that were inventoried on this map that you see behind me, and I'll get into the map specifically as we go on down, only 5 of those were tax foreclosures. The balance of those properties have to be processed according to the local government code, and I'll get into the details of that with this second round sale that I'm proposing. For the 5, actually there's 5 properties in yellow, 4 of which are not properties that will be used by the city. One of those properties is a future fire station site on Moneta. That's why it was acquired. So I'm not recommending that we sell that, obviously. And the 4 remaining properties, I would recommend that we sell them by, or 3 of the 4 I would recommend that we sell by sealed bid. We advertise, we put signs on the property saying we're going to take sealed bids on such and such date, and we advertise the minimum bid amount so that any bid that we receive will be in excess of the back taxes owed. In this way, we can sell those properties without having to obtain approval from any other taxing entity. And what's listed in that second column from the right is the back taxes owed on the 5 tracts shown, or the 4 tracts shown. The minimum bids are pretty small, $5,000–$6,000, because most of these properties are pretty small. There is one exception, and that is what we've always called the Benson property on Belknap. It's a 2.2-acre commercial tract that's been vacant next to the trading post building with the mural on it that the high school students painted. What I show in the minimum bid column there is an amount that I feel that we can obtain for that property. If you look at the asterisks beside the street address, 4118 Belknap, and look down at the bottom, it shows that the back taxes actually owed on that property are $164,391. That may be what's owed. However, through several attempts that we've had in the past couple of years since I've been here at least, I'm 100% sure we will not obtain that amount in trying to sell this property. We have tried to sell this property to various parties since I've been here with what I call lowball offers. And the problem with this particular tract is one of the taxing entities is Fort Worth ISD. And when we take those offers to Fort Worth ISD, because they were less than the minimum bid, less than the total back taxes owed, less than what's called the minimum bid, we had to have the agreement of all the taxing entities. So we'd take it to Fort Worth ISD, and they'd reject it out of hand and would not even communicate with us what they would accept. So about a year ago, I came before this council, after researching with the tax attorneys a strategy on how we could sell this property, and we determined, and we got a resolution from this council to have what's called a second sale. That is to take that property back to the courthouse steps and sell it, try to sell it again on the courthouse steps, at which time there is no minimum bid. Whatever we tell the sheriff is our minimum bid is the minimum bid. So we can sell that property for whatever we feel is appropriate and not have to take any other taxing entities into consideration. The figure that I have here for that particular property, $85,000, is because I have an interested party in this property who has a commercial venture planned for the trading post. It's a restaurant, and he needs this property for parking. This is the most viable, most likely sale of that property that we've had or that I can imagine. So it would be my recommendation that we take that property to the courthouse steps in June, the first week of June, and have a sale with a minimum bid, if you will, of $85,000 and see what happens. So the other four properties, the other three properties that are left that are not to be used by the city, that the fourth one being the fire station site, I would propose just simply taking sealed bids on those, and again for the minimum bid. Now let me look at this map with you just real briefly, and then I'll get into the next category, the second round sale. As far as, let me show the audience first, the property, and it's going to be real hard for you all to see, but like I said, there's at least 35 properties on here. All of the green ones are city facilities, so obviously we can't sell those, for instance, the building that's sitting in. The primary properties that we're going to be considering for sale, the 15, 16 that really fit into these two categories, are colored orange. And these are vacant properties that have just been acquired over the years, some of them over 30 years ago. And that's what we're going to be concentrating on. Additionally, there are in blue, in light blue, there's 4 sites that are currently used by Public Works for stockpiling or other uses. This fourth large one that you may actually be able to see from out there is south of Airport Freeway. That is the IESI transfer station, which we lease to them on a 99-year lease. Plus, Public Works uses the balance of that property for road material storage, et cetera.
Mr. Flynn, if you would, will you take the mic off of the stand and hold it a little bit closer? I think most of us in here can hear, but since we're telecasting this, I know I've had numerous observations by people who watch that we move away from that and they're not able to hear. So if you would, please.
Good idea. I'll go mobile. So even though we're using those the 3 of those 4 properties, I've got them on this list, and I'll get into those in a minute. And then there's 1, 2, actually 2 right next to each other. So you could say 1, 2, 3, 4 properties in dark blue that the Parks Department either has plans for or may be using that are also on this list that we'll go into as well. Now let me let the council see the map. Can you all see it? At least barely. If you look at your spreadsheet, the map number is color-coded so that the top chart, which includes all those properties not currently being used by various departments, they're all color-coded in orange, and they have a corresponding map number on the map that's in the column there. Many of these properties you'll see are in residential areas, small residential leftover or left out lots, and the Benson property that I spoke of taking to the courthouse for second sale is here on Belknap. There is one commercial property back here on the backside of Diamond Oaks Shopping Center that the city purchased a few years ago. And if you look at the figure on the LAV is last available value. These are the TAD values. You'll see the very top one, item number 6. You'll see a pretty hefty number there. Even though that is the appraised value, if you will, by TAD, the likely purchaser of that I don't know that they'd pay that today. There may be a very limited number of folks that would be interested in it. One possibility, of course, would be the shopping center owner. The purchase of that track was before I got here, so I don't know if you purchased it from him or who. But if you purchased it from him, I doubt seriously he'd want it back. It's behind the center, and there are drainage issues on the property. As far as the orange tracks are concerned, and the first round sale, the ones that I'm proposing to either take the courthouse steps or do by sealed bid, the total amount that you could expect to receive if minimum bid is what we received would be slightly over $100,000. And that, of course, is highly dependent on what we obtain on the courthouse steps with regard to the Benson tract, because $85,000 of that is the Benson property. Let me move on into the second round sale now. These are properties that we would have to comply with the local government code, and the steps involved to adhere to that procedure are more time consuming, so will take us longer. That's why I'm proposing to package all these in a second sale, if you will. There's 11 properties remaining that are color coded orange that we would propose to go with on the second round sale. The steps involved would be, first, this city council would have to have a finding that these properties are all surplus properties. The second step would be, because they are governed by the local governmental code, we would have to have appraisals for each property, because we can't sell the properties for less than fair market value. Now, one of the last things that the tax attorneys researched that we were waiting on was what kind of appraisal do we have to have. They thought that there might be a possibility that we could rely on TAD values. And that is their recommendation to you, that if it is your wish, we can do so. They think they can support that decision. The only reason I make this a point is because a lot of these properties, the smaller ones, the value that you can hope to obtain from them is, not too much different than maybe what an appraisal would cost you. So maybe on the smaller properties, it would be a good idea to rely on the TAD value. On maybe some of the larger ones, like the property I just pointed out behind Diamond Oaks, you might want to get an appraisal. But I would seek direction from this council as to what you would want us to do with regard to appraisal for each property before we go with the second round sale. So the final step, obviously, would be to come back to this body at a future council meeting and have you designate which properties that you would find to be surplus and what appraisal method you would hope for us to use.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Flynn, for your presentation. I think Councilmember Williams has a question for you. If you would, let's go ahead and move the...
Okay.
Please.
Thank you, Mayor. For just for maybe a correction, Mr. Flynn, map item number 6, 4150 Revere, last available land value on that. If that's true, we purchased that for 10 cents on the dollar.
I was suspect of that number, and so I divided out the square footage. It comes out about $250 a foot. So it's possible that TAD has it valued for that. Again, I think that it's kind of questionable because of where it's located. That is behind the center.
Yeah, because that across the street on the highway is also valued at $250 a foot. So it's
pretty high.
It's $377 frontage versus Revere. Also, when we purchased that property back in 1999, the reason we and Mr. Fowler may be able to add something to this. I think when we bought that property, we were thinking of possibly a walking track for the senior citizens over there in that area. There was really nowhere for the people in that area to have to go walk. And I think it's probably what we bought that for, but like we're looking at April 99, 4 years later, we're still sitting on the property, and if we're not going to use it, I'd rather have these employees than have this piece of property. And another one is Benson. Don't do that, please. Another one is the Benson property. I was elected in May of 1998, and shortly after that, I started pushing to get the Benson property to be an eyesore, removed from Belknap and put back on the tax rolls. And still tonight, it's still not on there. You say that if we put that on the courthouse step and guarantee it at $85,000.
What we would do is tell the sheriff that would be the minimum bid that we'd accept, so that, excuse me, if the interested party that I spoke of turns out not to show up or follow through, then we would pull the sale, and that is if there's no other bidders. We'd pull the sale and go back to square one and try again.
Well, I've never attended one of those, so if you did that, could you be there to protect your own bid if you didn't put the low on it?
Yes, we will be there. The tax attorney and myself both will be there.
Okay.
And we can pull it even, we've already started the process to schedule this. But only reason we did so is because we, at any time, can pull our decision and pull it off there. Tonight, I would like to get an indication from the council if you'd like me to proceed at least with the Benson track. And I would prefer to have an indication from the council to go forward or not to go forward with the first round sale, so I can go ahead and start advertising those properties.
I can't speak for the rest of the council, but from 1998 to now, I'm still wanting to sell this. I'm a little concerned that now we are going to sell it, we're going to make a parking lot out of it, because it is a prime piece of property on a corner lot. And I know the two pieces, let me say this politely, the two pieces of property on each side of it aren't as pleasing as probably what someone would want to be between it, so it would probably be hard to market to someone to put there. But with the one to the west, I believe, is for sale. I saw a for sale sign on it. Has it already been sold, or do you know?
Are you saying west of the intervening
West
street?
of the Benson property.
Because
the trading post.
Oh, to the west. That's to the east of the property.
No, the trading post to the
It
west.
is to the west. I'm sorry. No, the trading post is under contract to this individual that's interested in this lot.
Okay. Now, is this a do or die deal for him to have that as parking?
Yes. He obviously needs parking to comply with our ordinances and to serve his patrons.
Okay. This is probably getting out of line, but let me ask one more question.
Okay, we are kind of drifting away from our
right.
primary purpose, but
Yeah,
please go ahead
if
with the
he,
question.
well, the reason I'm doing this is $85,000 we can put back into the budget or the operating to get back on the road. And also I want to be able to tax this after we sell it.
Yes.
If he does not get this property, is that going to kill his deal for his trading post?
Yes, I would think it would.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Hurley?
Mr. Flynn, were you asking for a motion?
I would
You
like.
said you'd like to have some action on this?
Yes, I would like some direction so that we can proceed with this first round sale.
Can we do
I'll
that?
make a motion that the council approve your efforts to go forward with the sale of the property, the Benson property. Okay.
You can have it placed on the next council meeting.
All right, we can do that.
I second the motion. He does it.
I'd like to have it on the next agenda.
Let me ask this. It's my understanding we're not going to have another meeting in May. I believe the first council meeting in June will be after the sale occurs on the courthouse steps.
Mr., if I can interrupt, Mayor, can we not ask for consensus on this from the council? Although you're not taking a vote, you can ask for consensus.
Hey.
Yeah, I'd settle for that.
Thank you. Let me ask the question this way, and you tell me if we're staying legal or not. Does any member of the council have a problem with him moving forward as he's recommended?
No.
There's no indication, so I would assume we have some consensus. Is that legal for me to ask that question in that way, or do we need to go through some other means? We're not taking any action.
All right, well, I'll consult with the city manager and we'll plot out a course and take action accordingly.
Okay, let's, is that sufficient from a legal point of view, what we've just said? Okay. Okay, we did get way off from why we're here tonight. We didn't come here to really get into developing some long-term philosophy about how we go about doing sales of property and that type of thing. We're here to find out what can we do in the next 4 months to bring revenue to the table to address the shortfall. Let's pull the focus back in. And Mr. Torres, can you and Mr. Flynn work on this situation about how we proceed from here on an administrative level?
My intention this evening was just to get that nod from you, and I generally know how you feel, and I think this is something that you would like us to do. The main point to make here is that the sale of all of this land will come back in, whatever we get that's ours, it will come back into the general fund, miscellaneous revenues. It's not anything budgeted. It will be windfall that will help us, if assuming we can do this and accomplish this by year end. Any of this money is going to help us in that bottom line when the fiscal year ends, and I think that's critical now.
Yes.
So.
Okay. Councilmember Fowler, I think your light is still on.
Do we have a possibly scheduled meeting or considered scheduled meeting for Thursday? Is that correct? Workshop?
This Thursday? No, there's nothing posted.
I thought we discussed tonight and possibly Thursday. Okay.
We
Never
were
mind, I was
just running
gonna
with tonight and
I was
see
just
where
gonna
that went.
suggest we could set that up for emergency reading if we needed action on it.
You know,
but that's fine.
I don't really think, unless there's something I'm not aware of, I don't think it's going to be required that council take an official vote. April, that's probably an unfair question for
This
you,
is
but
definitely
something to think
something I
about.
can look at tomorrow
Okay.
and get with you on that tomorrow, Richard.
Let me say this, this council did approve a resolution authorizing the second sale. That's already on the books. The second round properties that require the council to take action, that's easily going to be a month or so off. So there's no rush on that.
Okay, anything further for Mr. Flynn? Thank you, Mr. Flynn. And our City Secretary, Brenda Staub, will make our next presentation. We are as soon as we get through with these.
Good evening. Good evening, citizens and council. I'll be very brief. The records of this city are the history of the city. I'm a very small department. You take away a portion of my department, I cannot guarantee that the records and history of the city can be done properly. Please take into consideration that when I came on board, I already took the $15,000 cut that is being proposed to my city secretary budget. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Staub? Our final presenter, and then we'll take a break after Mr. Muir, our Assistant City Manager, makes his presentation, and we'll come back in following that for comments and a proposal by the City Manager. Mr. Muir.
Mayor and Council, I'm not going to be as brief as the City Secretary. I promise you I'll be briefer than Mr. Flynn. In the administrative services area, there's 4 areas that are affected by these budget cuts. Haltom City TV, he's a one-man show, so obviously there's no personnel cuts, so all the cuts had to come from maintenance and operations. And we've already been feeling that. He's already had equipment go out and tripods go down, so we're already facing issues there. But it's something that we persevere with. Same thing with IT. IT is a one-man, well, actually a 1.5-man show if you can have half a guy. But we have a part-time person there that is frozen. And the services there will be affected as well to the city staff. It won't affect the police department because they have their own staff over there, but it will affect the rest of the city staff. Before I do fleet, let me skip to beautification. The beautification board has a liaison. It's a part-time staffer, who is committed, devoted to the beautification board, and she is proposed to be, that position is proposed to be laid off. If that happens, the beautification board's projects will certainly be affected. To what degree, I'm not sure. It may go back to the public information coordinator to some degree, who was previously had that prior to the special events coordinator. But those will be affected, as will any NEAT programs, the Keep Haltom City Beautiful programs, the recycling programs, all those will be affected. Fleet is the last group I'll talk about. Fleet has 7 employees. 2 of those positions are proposed to be cut. The work orders for this year are down. If those cuts are realized, we will do the best we can to serve the staff in their fleet needs, but I think they're down because of the economy's down. They're taking better care of their equipment. The department's probably taking better care of their equipment. There's various different reasons to why that could be, but the responsiveness of the fleet of this fleet services area will be affected, but hopefully not to the detriment of the citizens or the staff. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Questions for Mr. Muir? Thank you, Mr. Muir. I think there are no questions. We have now heard from 11 of the 12 directors, and we will, at this point, take a break, and it'll be 10 minutes. That's 5 minutes after 8, and we'll begin promptly at that time, if you will, please, so we can move forward with our meeting tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back in session for the special budget workshop tonight. We have heard from the directors, and they have spoken with passion about their various areas and the concerns they have. All of you who are here in the audience tonight are here because of your concern about that, and you could tell, I think, from the questions that were asked by the elected officials that we are taking all of this very seriously, and we're trying to find a solution that can be a win-win for all of us. Having heard the presentations by the directors, we move now to the comments, and I think our city manager has a proposal to bring forth and lay on the table for us.
Before I jump into my proposal, Mayor, there are a few issues I'd like to, of miscellaneous nature, I'd like to address if I could, all related to the topic tonight. Pertaining to the survey that we conducted over the last several days, I think despite our attempts to make sure the purpose of the survey was clear, I think we didn't quite get there. There was a lot of discussion with the directors and trying to, the attempt was to convey the information back to all the employees about why we were doing this and what the outcome was, potential outcome. And there was a lot of confusion, obviously, by comments that came back in. But the reason we conducted this survey was to get information from the employees, and we wanted all of you to have some say-so or some opportunity to have some input into that process. There was nothing binding, obviously, and it did state that on the survey. It was just an opportunity to explore several potential scenarios that might play out. The message was clear in the tabulated results about the desire of the employee. So I feel like the tool was useful, although a little bit surprising at the same time. About the issue of my recent pay raise, and I think that this is a topic that I'd like to deal with probably just one time and make my comments, and then I'll just move on to some other things. I really don't want to spend a lot of time on this. There was clearly some misinformation about this particular topic that was out there in the community and with our staff. I think we've got far more important things to deal with tonight, but nevertheless, it still seemed to me justifiable to bring up the topic. When I was hired close to a year and a half ago, the city council agreed that at the end of the 1 year, I would be evaluated and considered for an increase in pay. And although the timing didn't fall exactly right, the city council was simply fulfilling their commitment to me when I was recently evaluated and given a 4% increase. A lot of confusion on the number. It was 4%. I've lived up to my commitment to the city, and I think it was the only right thing to do for the city council to fulfill their part of that as well. And I appreciate it, as a matter of fact. I didn't ask for the raise or the evaluation, nor did I take part in a whole lot of that discussion. I wasn't really even in the room during most of the time that the decision was being made, and I was told about the decision after the fact. I did not receive any pay raise last October, as did a great many of city employees, and I think there was some confusion about that too. There were some that seemed to think I was double dipping in some way. Public safety employees got a 2% increase in October, cost of living across the board raise, and they also received 4% on their anniversary dates throughout the year. Non-public safety received anywhere from 2 to 5%, and the average was about 4%, which is what I got. I've been seriously contemplating over the last few days and several weeks really about giving mine up. There's been some discussion I've had with some of you individually, and I've come to the conclusion today that I don't think it's the right thing to happen, and I'll tell you why. I wouldn't think it would be right for any of you, any other city employee, to give up a raise that you recently received either. I think you guys earned it. I think you received it, and it's yours. And if at all possible, I don't think it should be taken away from you or me either. And that's my opinion. And apparently it was the opinion of the vast majority of the employees based on the results of the survey. There's probably no guarantee about what we might receive in the future. And I think we all realize this. We're just going to have to go one day at a time, not really knowing what next year's going to bring. We need to find another way to deal with our crisis, I believe, rather than take money away from employees, myself included. There's never really been any question about what happens to salaries throughout this organization are going to impact me as well. I'm with you guys. The city council will deal with me more than likely in the same manner that everyone else has dealt with. And I think that's the way it ought to be. Way too much time on the topic. I'm just going to move on. There were many questions and concerns about why we're still building so many streets and capital projects with the declining economy within the city. And so I felt like it was probably warranted to kind of jump into that a little bit also. But what most people do not realize is the fact that the money used to finance these capital projects is not part of our operation funds, and that's where our shortfall is. The monies that go into those projects, street and various facilities you see that we have ongoing, primarily come from bond revenues that can't be used for salaries or any kind of other operational expense, or even some of it's coming from sales tax with very specific intended uses that are regulated by state law that we don't have any control over that. We can obviously have a tough economy that impacts our day-to-day abilities and still have the ability to construct all this public infrastructure. And there really is no better time to do that than now because interest rates are at all-time low. And many people speculate that it won't be very long at all before those interest rates start crawling back up. Another option that had been recommended to the city council, and I don't really know where it originated, I believe it came from a city employee, and that was a recommendation that the city council consider some kind of a graduated cutting depending on your salary level, and it was asked the city staff prepare a chart that shows what kind of monetary impact that might have on the city. Pat had actually included that in the handout that was given to you. It was on page 6. He skipped over it at my request so that I could kind of bring it up at this point in the meeting. As you can see, obviously it does generate some money, but then it gets back to the survey. The problem with the survey is that by and large, the vast majority of the people, city employees, are not desirous of any kind of pay cut. And I think if the city went on and pursued that in some way, I think it would really create a lot of negative repercussion. I think morale is probably the lowest I've ever seen it anywhere I've worked right now, primarily instigated by the anxiety, the discussions that have taken place on this issue. So I really look forward to us moving on and making some kind of final decision fairly soon on the issues. Also, there have been a lot of good suggestions about things we should do to cut expenses. Every suggestion that has come forward is given some kind of consideration. There's already a number of the suggestions that have come from city employees and city council that we've put to work. There were some suggestions made that we had already put into effect, and that was good. It indicated that everybody was thinking. We have the entire staff, my staff certainly, and I sense that it's widespread throughout the whole organization, that they're in this cut and conservation mode. And I really believe that they're doing a good job and committed to doing the best job they can with whatever resources they're given. Are we through finding things to eliminate? I don't think so. I think we're a long way from it. I think every day there's some discussion and more consideration of other areas, opportunities, for increasing our revenues in various places. So I want to encourage everyone, City Council included, to continue to look at this, and I'm committed to getting through this whole problem. Okay, here's my new proposal. I've just provided a copy of it for you. Got a couple of extra copies, probably not enough for everyone in the room, but I'll kind of walk through it with you. I realize that eliminating positions is a very difficult thing to do. It's not anything I want to be a part of personally. I understand the situation here. The manager side of me has to see the big picture. I think my job is to be focused on the long-term financial integrity of the organization, and that's a big part of my job and my responsibility, and I take it pretty seriously. But the human side of me, and believe it or not, I have a human side. Many people don't often see that, but that human side wants to look out for the individuals, and sometimes when you do this, you lose sight of the big picture. There really is no good solution or compromise to our problem here tonight. I understand that the City Council is intently focused on avoiding the elimination of any jobs. I've had conversations with all of you. I understand what your desire is. So the last couple of days I've been kind of rethinking this through, and I think one of my tasks is to satisfy your desire. And so here's another consideration that I'm giving you, and I give it to you reluctantly but confidently. For now, there were 12 full-time positions that were recommended for elimination, and 2 part-time positions. I still, in my recommendation, I'm hanging on to those 2 part-time positions. I think that they can effectively be eliminated and not have any kind of significant impact on services. But the 12 full-time positions, I'm recommending that under this new proposal that we hold on to them. This is going to cost us about $78,000, as you'll see in the general fund, which is our primary concern here. About $78,000 to satisfy 7 positions between now and the end of the fiscal year. short of coming up with any additional ways of cutting expenses, and I really expect to find some other things. And the land sale that Kent was talking about is truly one of those things that's going to help us in the end result here. But this scenario of hanging on to these positions in the general fund, 7 positions, is going to affect the drop of the fund balance by an additional $78,000. And you just need to know that. We save the positions for now, but there's no guarantee of what will happen after October 1. I think it'll depend on a lot of discussion, that we have in the coming months about to what level, to what degree the City Council wants to take this with next year's budget. I think we all understand what this is going to mean. We're going to have to be looking very hard at a property tax increase. It will be unavoidable, and it could be a property tax increase of some significance. It depends on how many of these positions you want to keep after October. And keep in mind, these 7 positions that we may retain now, there are, I don't even know the number right offhand, of all of the frozen positions that are really giving us the ability to do this now. So, no guarantees. I do not think that this is the best answer for the long-term good of this organization. I don't believe that. But it may be the right thing to do in the short term. And so I'm bringing this to you as an alternative solution, remedy. Short-term remedy is probably the word. If we do this, you need to be prepared to show that year-end fund, ending year-end fund balance significantly reduced. And it's not going to achieve our fund balance policy of 20% that was set last year. On page 2, I'll point out the last column. This is a modified summary sheet to one of the first tabs, I believe, in the packet that was sent to you previously. And I'll just kind of point down to this has been modified to keep and retain those 7 positions within the general fund. Bottom line, right column down near the very end, we're going to be under our reserve fund balance by $695,000. About $700,000 we're going to be short. And it won't take, it's going to take us several years to recover that. My expectation now, just somewhat early in this budget process, is that we won't make any recovery in next year's budget on that fund balance. I don't see it. We'll be good to keep our head above water. With some luck and the economy helping us along, potentially the next year we can make up for half of that. Probably the following year, the other half. I think it'll take us at least 3 years to pull ourselves out of it. So there's a price we pay, and it may be the price that we need to pay. I think I'm through, unless y'all have any questions.
We have 3 lights that have already come on, and I want to ask one question, then we'll go to Councilmember Fowler, Williams, and Henderson in that order. Do I understand that what you have presented to us here, is that a short-term recommendation from you, or is that merely an option, another option to lay on the table? Are you recommending at this point
it's a short-term recommendation from me to get you where you want to be.
Okay. I need to clarify if this was just another option or if this is a recommendation from the city manager of Haltom City to address the issue for the next 4 months.
It is a
with no guarantees of what may come after the end of 4 months.
It'll be in y'all's hand as to what happens after October 1, truly.
Okay. Councilmember Fowler.
Okay, Richard, I guess our most current fund balance then, our estimated fund balance is going to be right at $2 million, which is 14.8%.
That's correct.
Of the operating fund.
That's correct. And our policy states 20%. So
Yeah,
You know,
I understand that.
Roughly 25% short of where we need to be.
Owning and operating my own business, I would love to maintain a 20% fund balance, but realistically, if you can stay in there around 15%, you're pretty darn good.
15 isn't the end of the world.
No,
but it's slippage.
Well,
and slippage hurts.
I'm sure our Federal Reserve right now is experiencing slippage also.
Sure. Everyone is.
Mr. Elfrink had made comment to the possible upturn in the economy. You know, if we're going to be optimistic, we're going to believe that the economy is going to get better in the near future. Typically, it stays down for a couple of years and then comes back. So we've been in about a little over a year of recession. So hopefully, in the next 8 months to a year, it's going to make the turn and come back. Believe it or not, I am an optimist, and I do believe that is going to happen. I believe the government, our federal government, will get the economy back on track before long. I guess one of my questions that I wrote down was, can we draw down the fund balances to cover until the budget's prepared? I think we can. I don't have a problem drawing fund balances down to as long as we're remaining somewhere around 13 to 15%. I don't have any problem at all. I feel like that we have about 4.5 months left. We're in mid-May now. We have 4.5 months until a new budget's adopted. You know, I would strongly urge you and Mr. Elfrink to go back and get some of these bugs worked out. You know, I think there's some things that we need to be a little more conservative in. I know 3% growth. I would highly recommend we stay at somewhere around 15% to the negative, assuming that, you know, that won't put us in another predicament. Hopefully it's not going to get any worse. I don't know that our economy could get much worse than it is right now. So anything we do is probably going to be to the better. I just have to look at the budget cost and see if they're more valuable than the loss of employees or loss of the services to the citizens. And I don't feel like that, you know, cutting $77,000 is worth it in the overall picture currently. Now, realizing that, you know, we're overwhelmed with material, and I'm sure if y'all look, you know, these are stacks of material we get on one. You know, one item, just this budget thing, not including all the other daily things that we take care of from the council standpoint. I would like to see that, you know, we take our time, we go back and not make any cuts right now. I don't feel like that drawing down our budget down to the 14.8%, I don't feel like that's going to hurt us personally. I feel like that service to our citizens and employees being able to finish out this budget year is more important than drawing our budget down. I place a higher priority on that than I do worrying about a fund balance, which, you know, as we spoke in the last meeting, you know, it's great to have a AAA bond rating, but if we have an A bond rating, we're still, you know, money's cheap from an interest standpoint right now, so I don't know that that's going to hurt us. I'm not saying that there won't have to be some things that are looked at in the budget, but I personally feel like that's the place we need to look at. And we've set a budget for this year, and I'd like for us to stay on course for the remainder of the year, personally. I guess that's all I have for right now.
Thank you, Councilmember Fowler. I believe the city secretary has made copies of what was just given to us, and it started to be circulated from the back on the city manager's alternative solutions to avoid layoffs, so you should be getting a copy of that and can follow along.
Keep if I could, Mayor, just
Yes.
for clarification purposes, all the other cuts that have been recommended in the packet are still proposed. It's just adding back in these 7 positions in the general fund that we would modify.
Councilmember Williams, I believe you have your light, and Councilmember Henderson, and then Councilmember Hurley.
Thank you, Mayor. Richard, I see this drawing the fund balance down from 20% to 14%. I know politics. I've learned it pretty well since I got here, and I'm looking at some numbers here also from previous administrations, previous mayors, going back to the early 80s. Our tax valuation right now is 45.5. I'm looking back here in 1984, tax valuation was 68 cents. From 1985 to 1986, correction, from 84 to 85, it went from 68 cents to 41 cents. That's a cut of 27 cents a hundred. And these are very good bargaining tools when you're trying to run for city council and wanting to make that $20 a month. If you can cut the taxes. And what we're looking here tonight is what we reap when we make those bragging deals that we can cut the taxes and cut the taxes. And I'm 54 years old, and I don't remember much stuff going down in price, you know, since growing up. And when this survey that we sent out, there was some stuff on there that was serious, some stuff that was humorous, some stuff that was slanderous. And but I think for the most part, if we search what we put out, I commend Councilmember Henderson for asking for it to be put out. I think there's some merit to that. I think there's some cuts that can be made.
Based on some of the comments that have
Right.
come. Yeah.
And since according to the charter, I'm termed out, so I can say this, taxes are going to have to go up in October. We've got a free ride for as long as we can. 4 or 5 years ago, we did a salary survey. I think we spent $25,000 to do a survey, find out that we were paying less than anybody else in Tarrant County was. And we have been struggling to get the salaries of the employees up to where they're competitive with the other cities. We've lost many quality employees to other cities due to our salary structure. And that's not because of the city manager. It's not because of the way the city's run, it's because of the tax. If you don't have the money, you can't pay the employees. And these people pick up the phone, they want a fireman. They want that fireman there in 2 or 3 minutes. They want a policeman, they want them in 3 or 4 minutes. If their water main breaks, they want somebody out there fixing the water main. I don't think drawing this balance down will kill us. I think politically it won't look real good on your resume for your next job that if you ever decide to leave here.
I'll be pretty focused on fixing it before I leave.
Average life of a city manager per city is about 5 to 7 years. And so you've only been here a year, so you've got some more time to straighten this out. It's going to take teamwork. It's going to take working together. It's going to take a tax increase. It's going to take a change in lifestyle. There may be some changes in this town come that some people aren't happy with. But for us to be able to compete and be where the other cities are, we're going to have to change some of our styles.
Lessons should be learned from this.
Right. And we need to open our minds up. We need to be able to listen. I'm as guilty as anybody else is not wanting to listen to someone else. You know, I've got my way. I'm pretty strong-headed. I know it's a surprise to you. But, you know, these deals, I hope we take these and heed to them. Some of them are very minute. One of them, I think, is turn the thermostats up to 78. You know, that doesn't sound like a real drastic measure. 365 days. 360.
Where'd Janet go? We struggle with this every day.
I know her office is 80 and yours is 60, so you know you need to get yours back up and open the door and leave your door open on the office and let some air go over into hers.
Can I wear shorts?
You can wear shorts on Saturdays and Sundays, but morale is around. You know, I see these people. I live in this town, so I have a conversation with them. And I only have 3 employees in my business, and if I make them happy, they work hard for me. If I don't make them happy, they don't work for me at all, and it reflects. And I want these people to be happy, but most of all, I want the citizens of Haltom City to be served. And if we can make this happen until the budget, and when we get to the budget, then we can look at all this serious. we talk fat, there's not a lot of fat. There's, I think every council member on here has tore the budget up looking, for ways that they feel that money's wasted. I applaud you for, applauding you for bringing this forward. I think it will work. I think this council will make it work on this budget. And go ahead and fire me tonight, but I'm going to push to raise taxes in October to where we can get us back on where we need to be, back on track.
We truly need to be a little less dependent on that sales tax, because in times like this is when you feel it. And Haltom City is not the only city. I mean, this is a problem that many cities have experienced, and lessons should be learned. And Mayor?
Councilmember Henderson?
I'm in full agreement with Councilmember Fowler and Williams, and that we can draw down the fund balance and survive. The question that I have, Richard, is this new proposal that you proposed to us. It's 7 positions, and in your old proposal you had 12 positions.
Well, I would recommend, even though you haven't been given the detail of the cost on those, I wouldn't want to come back and include those 7 in the general fund without including the other 5. I think they need to be
All 12.
All 12 at this point.
Excluding the 2 part-time.
Excluding the 2 part-time.
Okay. Secondly, I'm in agreement with Councilmember Williams again on the tax rate. Tax rate here is 45.5, and we need to strongly look at that in the future, these next budget session, and see what we can't do to bring that into up a little bit to offset some of these costs. I don't have a problem with going forward with that, and I, like John, will be pushing if we need to raise it 2 or 3, 4 cents. Well, then we need to raise it 2 or 3, 4 cents. And I don't have a problem with that. That's all, Mayor.
Councilmember Hurley and Councilmember Sutton following that.
Richard, in this original package that you handed out to us, where you showed on page attachment E. Attachment E.
Uh-huh.
Oh, excuse me. On your latest proposal, you're showing restoring 3 public safety positions. Is this firefighter drivers?
That is correct, sir. Those
Okay.
3 positions.
Well, I would go into detail, but I don't think it's really necessary for what I'm going to propose, because you've got a total of 12 positions. I believe that if we go ahead and maintain our same service level and not cut these 12 people out of here and use the reserve fund until the end of the year, because we can't adjust tax rate at this time and not until next year's adopted tax.
Till September, correct.
And I'm quite aware that we will have to increase the tax. But I'll make a motion that we accept it with no classified positions at all laid off.
Okay, and a motion I think would be appropriate too.
I just made it.
Okay.
If we could, we had one person who had asked to speak, so can you hold that motion for just a moment? Councilmember Sutton?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Three things. First thing is we'd talked a little bit, Richard, about the fund balance and how that would affect our bond rating. For us to dip into the fund, and I'm not opposed to that, I do that in my personal budget. If we have an emergency that we need to take place, for instance, an engine goes out or a transmission goes out, we put savings bonds and we use those for things like that. But tell me, how much is that going to be an impact on our bond rating for the city if we dip down for possibly 6 months or a year and then come back up with it?
I'll take a stab at it, and if I say something wrong, Pat, please correct me, okay? A little bit later this year, there's a potential for the city to issue $4 million for a couple of projects that will certainly spark a rating review. Next year, we're set to issue $8 million for 2 projects. We might go ahead and take a look at interest rates and conditions and stuff, and I wouldn't be surprised if I came back to you and I said, let's issue all of that $12 million at one time later in the year, because I think we can save some money on issuance fees by doing that. And there's a lot of homework, but nevertheless, we've got about $12 million to issue. That's going to require 1 or 2 rating reviews. This dropping this fund balance, I believe, it just raises all kinds of flags that will potentially lower our rating. That's the downside. The other side to it is that when you issue bonds, you basically purchase an insurance policy on that, guaranteeing that this is going to be paid back, and that locks you into a pretty good rate. So even if our rating drops, there's a potential that it's not going to affect the interest rate that we might get on those issues.
Okay, so it's a minimal impact possibly to draw on the funds. And I agree with Councilman Fowler that is a good short-term mechanism. Talking about the level of indebtedness that we have here in the city, why was that not put into any of the charts? Because as I understand, a nominal city's indebtedness may be 33% of its revenues, as we'd talked, and I'd talked with some other people about it. But what is our current indebtedness here in Haltom City?
I don't have, tomorrow evening when we meet, I've got a manual that really details that. Pat, can you off the top? Because I'm not sure I can.
Let me answer that by saying that we've had the same financial advising firm out of San Antonio for about 30 years.
Right.
The individual himself who works with us now by the name of Mark McCliney visits with us on a regular basis. He has carried forward the philosophy that this city and many cities work with, which is a very conservative philosophy and is similar to what many people do at home. We make what we call a level debt service strategy. Our general fund debt service has remained at about $2.1 million for the entire, I think, time that I've been here. It has built into it, as does the water fund debt service, every 3 to 4 years, a large chunk of that is paid off, just like when you pay off your car.
Sure.
Well, you have an option then. Shall I get a new car, or can I make the old one go for a while longer? With us, that really is not quite an option, because we have a very old infrastructure, primarily in streets and the water utilities that are under those streets. And today we're addressing some of the buildings that are 50 years old or more. But the philosophy has been keep the debt service level, and every 3 or 4 years when a big chunk drops off, that's when you borrow a little bit more to continue to address new projects, but maintain that level debt service again, so it does not impact the tax rate.
I understand, but that rate has not remained level, as I understand it. It's actually increased over the past 6 years. Is that correct, or am I wrong?
Without the chart in front of me,
Mr. Elford, could you
exactly.
come in closer to the microphone, please?
Sure. Oh, excuse me, I have it.
Pat, will you address the M&O to INS ratio opinion about how concerning that might be to you, which is, I think.
Yeah.
I think I see your point there too.
While we're looking that up, Mr. Torres, did I understand you to say that the answer to Mr. Sutton's questions is something that you and he are going to be discussing in the next day or two?
Yes, sir. Tomorrow evening, Jim really hasn't had the benefit of an extensive briefing by me, and tomorrow evening we're going to be spending quite some time together and going over a whole lot of this kind of information.
Will that be sufficient, Mr. Sutton, at that
That'd
time?
be sufficient for me. It's just in reaching decision, tonight, certainly want to have an understanding going into it with both eyes open about what that does to that ratio.
Right. And I know we have a meeting coming up with Mark
Friday morning.
Friday morning. I don't know if you're going to be available, but it might be a meeting you would like to sit in with us on and meet him and get to know him a little bit and kind of, hear a different perspective.
Okay.
And if I may, just one more point. When I referred to a level debt service, I heard you use the word ratio a moment ago. I was thinking of the actual dollar amount that is paid on an annual basis. You're talking about the portion of our tax rate that is dedicated to debt service. And there is, depending on the maturity of a city, a ratios that are better. A South Lake that is growing very rapidly and has a great deal of infrastructure needs, they'll have a much higher portion of their tax rate going to debt service because they're building so much so rapidly.
Right.
However, at our point, and some people will argue that our infrastructure has been neglected over the years, and now we're doing a great deal of catch-up. We may have a little bit higher debt service portion of our tax rate also. In fiscal 1994, the percentage going to debt service was 60%, 60.2%. Today, it's 42%.
42%, okay.
All right, but the level, the dollar amount is basically has not fluctuated a great deal, but the amount of money going to the operating portion has changed.
Okay, that's.
Is that sufficient?
Yeah, that's sufficient for me. I just wanted to make a third point that when we're talking about tax rates, that can be an effective marketing tool for a community, and it defines the character of a community. And so whenever this council looks into the tax rate, I hope that we're going to look at a lot of these issues surrounding the raising or keeping the tax rate the same.
Yeah. It won't come lightly, I can assure you, from staff. With whatever the recommendation will be, it makes me nervous to think about it.
Yeah.
But that's where we are.
All right, thank you, Richard.
Yes, sir.
We have one light on, that's Councilmember Williams, and we probably after that need to move forward. We had on the agenda that was distributed to everyone, we told the audience that we'd have an opportunity for comments from visitors before the council took action. And so after Councilmember Williams addresses whatever issue he has, if there are no other questions from the council, we'll move then to comments from visitors, and then we'll get quickly to the motion from Councilmember Hurley.
Okay. First of all, I wish y'all wouldn't refer to everything as buying a car. Let's get off on something else. 14 employees. We're talking about the bond rating. Talking about lowering the from 20% to 14% on reserve. Doesn't it always? Wouldn't they also look if you lowered 14, you had to get rid of 14 employees? Don't they look at that on the bond rating too? And also, while we're looking at this and saying, well, we're worried about drawing those down, how many other cities have 20% in their reserve? And other cities are, Arlington, a bunch of the bigger cities are experiencing a lot worse problems than what we are. Their bond ratings are going to.
If they don't make the necessary cuts and allow their fund balances to drop, those cities will probably also be impacted by lowered ratings, most certainly. How many others have 20%? I think the larger, the affluent, the cities that are doing well financially, they'll have it. Smaller cities that are struggling don't have it. And we don't. It was a goal that we set, a higher expectation we set for ourselves, and we've not been there yet. Just a minor correction. We're not dropping it from 20% to 14%. 20% was that was budgeted. That was our goal expectation to complete this year at 20%. We finished last year, second column, we finished last year at 18%. Okay, with the expectation this year we'd move to 20 and meet our policy. So we're really slipping truly from 18 last year to potentially 14 this year. That may vary depending on what happens in the next few months.
Had we not set the goal though at 20, we'd probably never made it to 18.
Well, we did set that policy before the end of the fiscal year. Yeah, that's right. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with setting high expectations. We need to. And we need to do everything we can to try to hit that mark, and sometimes we won't, and this is one of those times. But we shouldn't go back and modify our policy thinking, oh, we can't hit 20, let's change it to 15, and then we'll hit it. Well, no, keep that up there. Push ourselves hard.
Anything else, Councilmember Williams? Councilmember Fowler?
I'll decline for a moment. Comments in a minute.
Okay. As we indicated a moment ago on the agenda that was handed to you to begin with, we made a place for comments from visitors. I do have one form that has been filled out, even though I mentioned earlier it was not necessary. If you'd like to add anything before the council takes action in this regard. Mr. Glenn Jackson, are you here? And would you like to address the council at this time? If you would come to the microphone, even though I have your name and address here, if you will give it for the record, and you have 5 minutes. Mr. Jackson.
My name is Glenn Jackson. I live at 3340 Rita Lane. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for allowing me to speak. I won't take but just a minute. I'm a long-time resident, almost 40 years of Haltom City. I like Haltom City. I like my home. I like living in Haltom City. I plan to live here the rest of my life. I understand the problems that the city council is facing and the city manager. I don't understand why we should ask our employees of the city to pay our bills. I think we as residents and taxpayers should pay our own bills. I would not like for the fire truck not to show up if I had a medical emergency or a fire at my house. And I would like for the policeman to show up quickly if I needed a policeman. I have nothing else to say except that I don't think we as taxpayers and we as residents should expect our employees of the city to pay our bills. That's our job, and I think we should do it. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Do we have anyone else in the audience who would like to address the council before we move forward to take action on the recommendation by the city manager? Okay, there being none, Councilmember Fowler, do you you deferred a moment ago? Are you ready to address your issues at this point?
I was just going to make a few comments. Mr. Jackson, I appreciate you taking the time. I assume that's your wife with you. If we had about 39,000 more citizens that had your same philosophy and attitude, we wouldn't be in this situation right now, and I do appreciate it. I want to thank the employees that filled out the stuff. This information is very helpful to us as a council. Any input that you can have, believe it or not, makes a difference, and do appreciate it. I see one in here, though, real quick, about taking a 2% cut as long as it was all salaries, even though set by the city council from the top to the bottom. I can assure you that I know myself, without a doubt, any considerations that are taken during any budget will take place in effect all the way from Richard Torres all the way down to any employee that's within this organization. So everything that happens, everyone will be taken into consideration and looked at, and do the best we can to make all the value decisions. I see another thing on here about the sale of alcohol. That's not something that the city council does. I understand that there's a group out there that's working on that right now. You know, if you people believe in that, then, you know, if you're a resident of Haltom City or you're a concerned volunteer, then, you know, if that's something you feel strongly about, participate in the process. If you feel against it, participate against it. I see things about car lots in here. Let me assure you guys, those car lots, like it or not, they pay sales tax, they pay property tax. There may be a higher and better use for, in some instances than what we have there, but they are paying, and they are part of our community, and they help pay your salaries. So we need to understand that no matter what, I'll be the first to tell you, I own car lot property, drive time for anyone that wants to look at it on Belknap, and I pay a great deal of property tax at that location. Any business that we have, we all need to be thankful for. We don't need to bash any of them. We need to do as employees and as council members and citizens, we need to be thankful for the residents and the employees, and as well as the business owners, the people that have property in this community, because they pay the bills for all of us. We all do, and we're all in this together. And we need not lose sight of that. Every property owner, whether it's commercial, residential, whatever, helps pay the taxes. You guys, when y'all are at work and y'all stop off at a convenience store and buy Coke and pay sales tax on it, y'all help your own cause. I said it before, I think the biggest thing we can do is help ourselves. We have to remain positive, and we have to do what we can do to make this a better situation for all of us. So in saying that, I appreciate your comments, and I would like for anyone else to please, if you see something else, drop it off with the city secretary, or however Richard makes it available to y'all. If y'all have future comments, feel free. I don't think that all the bashing and all does any good. We can do things constructively. If you disagree with the position, let's not drag the individuals in there personally. Let's just say that we maybe feel we have a different philosophy or a different idea of how something should be, and let's do things constructively, and we can make this better. Thank you.
Councilmember Hurley, I believe we're ready for your motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Haltom City has always been a good place to live. I've liked it. I've lived here for a long time. I worked here for a long time. And I feel like it's not just employees and staff, it's more like family. Because some of our kids grew up here and went to work for this same city, and they're still here. It's got a lot of heart to it. And I feel like that the way our staff is leveled out at this time, we're about as lean as we need to be, because there are a lot of things additionally that could be done that we don't have the people to do. But I'm going to make the motion that all current and future vacancies be frozen until agreement by the council and city manager for these positions to be filled. That we maintain all current levels of staffing. Any changes will be addressed during budget sessions with the council. Maintain all current levels of service to our citizens. Accelerate the sale of surplus city property. That's it.
Okay, you have heard the motion. Madam City Secretary, do you have it? You need a copy of Councilmember Hurley's motion, if we could. Mr. Torres?
I have one concern. We didn't really have an opportunity to get into it, and I wasn't sure that, I didn't realize that the motion would include some of the language that you mentioned, Mr. Hurley, about the freezing of positions.
I just want to clarify, is that excluding the 2 part-time positions that were in our packets?
I thought he did include, didn't he?
But it was all classified.
So we're going to maintain
that includes
everybody,
what we had,
all
yes.
14 positions?
Yes.
Oh, 12 being full-time?
Yes.
2 part-time. That's your desire, to keep those 2 part-time
Yes,
also? Okay.
Okay, does everybody understand the motion and the second?
Point of information, Mayor.
I beg your pardon?
Point of information.
Okay.
Actually directed toward you, Richard. Is this a workable motion for you? Can you work with it?
Yeah, it's a little deviation from what I recommended, but I'm glad to get the economic development position. That's important, so I'll take it. Thank you.
Councilmember Williams and then Councilmember Fowler. We have a motion, a second on the floor, and I would assume your lights are on for discussion on the motion.
I have one other concern, and it concerns the library. Are the
Hours are going to be cut.
are the hours going to be cut?
I think we should. That's my feeling. I don't know how y'all feel. Rod is geared up to do it. It's not going to save a great deal, but again, we're still in a cost-cutting mode wherever we can, and still giving the community 6 days a week at the library seems sufficient to me. But
Well, if we do that, I guess we can take a look at it and just get some feedback from it between now and
after a few
budget
months,
time.
and the first draft of the budget is going to be presented to y'all on July the 14th, I believe. So that'll be a couple of months, and we should have a good feel as to how that worked. And keep in mind, the library was closed on Sundays up until 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, and that's the way it was for a long time. So we're really just going back to the way it was.
And one other question concerning Mr. Flynn's assistant. Is that person already lined up to be hired, or
Yes. Yes.
that's the reason we're kind of...
No, well, that's not the reason, but Kent and I had a discussion about it today, and I'd frozen the position, and I told him that let's see how it evolved tonight, and I was going to bring it up earlier, and I didn't, but it's a time. Kent made a good point. He wasn't whining. Kent is one person, and there's a lot of expectations right now, and it's more than a one-man job. He really needs someone. And it's unfortunate that we lost Kelly after such a short period of time. But Kent does have someone lined out that who I happen to know. And
30 seconds or less.
Okay.
Explain to the employees and the citizens here how that person is paid that's not paid out of the general fund. Let them know where that money comes from.
Kent and this other position are paid from the economic development sales tax money that comes in, used primarily for economic development purposes, although there's a variety of things we're using the money for. It's all also eligible to use it for parks and recreation, which is a good deal of that money's going that way. But sales tax, half-cent earmarked for economic development.
Councilmember Fowler?
Yeah, I can't support that motion currently, though. I could agree with it. I think that if we're having a hiring freeze, though, I think we need to maintain a freeze. We've got a budget session coming up, and we've got a new budget that'll be in place in 4.5 months. And I don't know that right now that we need to hire anyone. We just got through talking about laying off 14 people and shutting the library hours down and doing this and doing that and laying firemen off. And now we're going to, even though it's economic development, we're still talking about adding another position or filling a vacancy. I somewhat take offense to that. I don't feel like that we need to fill any positions currently. I think we need to maintain what we have, and that's just me personally.
Sure, I understand. It's a position that has the potential to make us money. That's my best case I can make for it.
Okay, and I
understand. Whatever y'all desire.
currently disagree.
Anything further, Councilmember Fowler?
No, sir, I'd just like to go on record if we're about to vote. That's the only reason I would vote against that motion.
Any other discussion on the motion? Okay, although I probably will not get to vote on the motion, I only vote in the event of a tie. I'm in full support of this motion. I think this is a win-win situation for all of us. While it's not an ideal solution to draw down fund balance, I think if we can maintain what we have without the layoff of these 14 positions, the citizens of Haltom City are well served for the next 4 months. There being no further discussion on the motion, if you will, gentlemen, register your vote. And that passes, Madam City Secretary. Mr. Torres, we're about ready to adjourn. Do you have any final comments before we're adjourned? And I'll also give members of the council an opportunity to be brief, if we would, please.
I really appreciate the crowd that's here tonight, because there's a lot of employees that are here that are going to go back, and tomorrow they're going to have probably a little better understanding of some of the dynamics and some of the issues that we're having to deal with here. And I think that was time well spent on their part, and it was a much longer meeting than I thought, so thank you.
Okay, and if we can, Councilmember Hurley, Mayor Pro Tem Hurley, if you have anything you'd like to say to the audience tonight, the live audience or the TV audience, and then we'll just come right on down the line.
I appreciate the turnout of all the employees. I don't think I've ever seen this many of them in one room. We appreciate your support, and we need your help. Thank you.
Councilmember Everett.
I have no comments, Mayor, other than to thank everyone for coming out and for all of their input.
The employees we have here in Haltom City are very special. They're the ones, you are the ones that make this thing work. And I am so glad we were able to arrive at a solution. As I mentioned a moment ago, while it may not be ideal, it is a solution that we can live with and we can move forward with, and we can continue to provide the services to the citizens of Haltom City. And at least 14 of these positions that were under discussion before this meeting tonight that had the potential for layoff, these 14 individuals can get up in the morning, go to work, and feel real good about having a job. Councilmember Fowler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess as everyone stated, just thank you all so much for your input. Thank you for the hard work that you do each and every day. Sorry that we even had to bring this before y'all. I guess we're all, like I said, we're all in this together. All I ask that you do is give me a reason to get out there and defend y'all. I know you do each and every day, but let's just step and raise that bar, as Richard said, just a little bit higher. Make sure that when you do your job, you thank that citizen. If you're a police officer, you give them a ticket and you thank them for it, you know, or tell them we appreciate you doing business in Haltom City. No, Public Works, everyone, we really do appreciate y'all. It's a very difficult position that we oftentimes get put in, but we're in it with you. Just continue to work hard, and if you can even add just a little bit to it, just do your job just a little bit better each and every day. Thanks.
Councilmember Williams.
I appreciate your patience. I know this has been a trying 3 or 4 weeks for y'all, and I know that y'all heard all kinds of rumors. I know it's tough. I have been in a work world where I works for somebody else, and it's tough not knowing what your future is going to be. And I appreciate your dedication to different things that we go to, and see that all the employees participate. I know a lot of you work here because you want to and not because you have to, and we appreciate each and every one. And I'm just glad that we can give you this till October, help us get some more businesses in here, help us, if we decide to raise the tax rate, help support us on that, because we'll need it. Y'all go home, get rest, and work hard tomorrow.
I too appreciate y'all coming out and being here and support the efforts that we're trying to avoid. And you know, it's a difficult situation that we're in right now, and you take each and every day, I guess, for granted that you're going to wake up and go to work your next day, and then you look up and the council's looking at making a decision of laying 14 people off. You know, it's not something that I enjoy. Like I stated last night, I don't like making these decisions. It's something that that we have to do. I too, like John, want y'all to do everything y'all can. I received 3 letters in the mail from I don't know who, from different employees, giving me suggestions. I appreciate that. Y'all need to remember that each and every one of our doors are open at all times. Contact us, give us ideas, suggestions, and help us through this. You know, we're going to need everybody's support and help through these trying times. And you know, I'm just glad that we was able to save these jobs through the end of this fiscal year. And that's all I have.
I also want to thank you for coming out. It's sort of a baptism of fire coming into a council position and having to be faced with this. I want to thank you for your professional attitudes. I've listened, and I think all of my colleagues have listened to the things that you've applauded tonight, the issues that you've raised, the letters that you've written, and we really appreciate it. We're looking forward to seeing what we can do to make Haltom City a better place. I would just want to thank you for doing it every day, each and every day, for making Haltom City a great place to live. Thank you.
The decisions that we've been facing and struggling with over the last few weeks have been very difficult and very painful for us as well as for all of you. For us to be in a position to be responsible, and yet at the same time it was important to me that we deal with this subject with dignity and compassion while balancing that with being responsible. And we know we're asking the employees with the downturn in the economy to do more with less and maintain high morale, and hopefully the action the council's taken tonight will be a demonstration that the elected officials and the staff here are committed to these things. And with those comments, we stand adjourned.